Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The novel Sun Over the City finally got the recognition it deserved. It was printed in a fairly large circulation, and it did not lie dead weight on the store shelves, as it used to be with other Hunter books. The novel was bought up like hotcakes. Even one director, young but promising, signed a contract with Hunter for screen adaptation. For the first time in the past year, the writer who had become famous breathed fully, filled with pride in himself. A corner of his mind, he realized that the success of the novel, by and large, was a kind of gift from his publisher. On his own initiative, decided to invest in a PR campaign to the full program. Such generosity was a consequence of tragic events in the life of Hunter Wilson. Exactly 1 year ago, his wife Margaret died in a car accident. The publisher wanted to cheer up Hunter, who for 6 months has completely shrunk and stopped writing, locking himself away from everyone in his house. And guess what? As soon as the novel was talked about from all irons, Hunter resurrected and became the same. Yes, he understood all this, but these thoughts internally corrupted him. He needed no favors. Hunter was almost convinced that Sun Over the City, and without all this charity, could have won the hearts of his readers. It just so happened to be the case. In fact, the money that the publisher had spent on advertising could have been invested earlier. Surely, it is common for the publishing business money, just earlier that he was greedy, not believing in his talent, and afraid of losing losses. Another 6 months passed. Passions about his novel have somewhat subsided. Hastily filmed and released on the big screens, the movie. Basically, let's face it, it failed. The costs of its production were, of course, paid off. Even the profit of pennies turned out, but Hunter himself was able to watch only the first 20 minutes of the tape. Spit and vowed never to get involved with young, even if promising directors. Publisher hustled on the wave of fading success, needed at all costs. A new novel, even average now, could be well sold. Hunter began to break, at first by hints, then persuasion, and finally, demands that was quite logical, based on the clauses of the contract signed with the publisher in the next 5 years to give out on the mountain at least a novel a year. The advance payment was given to him, and it was just a matter of taking a pen and paper and sitting down at his desk. Hunter couldn't type on the computer because he didn't have enough speed. His fingers couldn't keep up with the heated thought. At first, he wrote on paper and gave 15-20 pages to his secretary, and the case in such a tandem got along quickly. But this time Hunter's thought barely moved, and he didn't want to see anyone near him, so he decided to write electronically. At times, mysticism became a trend. This summer, sales of a thriller with the presence of the otherworldly showed good sales, and the next book the publisher ordered Hunter in this genre. But this is not quite his niche. He could write good detectives. Even fiction turned out quite tolerable. But to pure mysticism, such he never wrote, but in the end, thought Hunter, it is not important what to write about, and it is important as he will write. In his head formed a plot about poltergeist, which pursued one unfortunate family wherever it did not escape from him. At the same time, all those who tried to help this family, uncleanness also began to harass. So in the end, those who wanted to get involved in the affairs of the family, there was no one left at all, and between its members increased strife, nerves, resources were exhausted so much that it was time to go begging. But somehow one day, no, one beautiful night, and Hunter couldn't think of anything else. The finale should be grandiose, unpredictable, and partly returning the reader from fantasy to reality. But already the first chapter immediately went wrong. 5 variants of the beginning were mercilessly erased and deleted even from the trash. The publisher began to inquire about the progress of the work twice a week. It was the beginning of July, and summer would slip away along with the current trend. Autograph sessions still had to be arranged. Acquaintances and strangers alike continued to take notes on social media and snip phones. Hunter didn't have time to get his own literary agent to handle these kinds of problems. He began to tire of success. Sensing his impending failure, something had to be done, and he decided to hide from the public eye. With the money accumulated in his work, he bought a house in some wilderness, warned everyone not to dare to touch him, at least in the next 2 months, and left, taking with him only bedding, a laptop, and 3 cases of Irish beer. Arriving at the place where he was met by the real estate agent who had handled the deal from start to finish, Hunter couldn't believe his eyes. It was that rare occasion when everything looked much better in real life than it did in the photos. The house was beautiful. A road surrounded by coniferous forest led to it from the town, tightly adjoining the steep shore of a huge lake. The shore had no guardrails, and the agent warned that in especially rainy weather, drive carefully because you could slip and fly 15 meters down, right onto the rocks. Not far from Hunter's new home, there was another structure that no one had warned him about before. I'm going to have neighbors? He wondered, staring at the agent in bewilderment. They are almost never here, he reassured him. They're going to sell the house too, so I assure you, no one will bother you in the next 6 months. They're having problems with the documents. So far, so and so. Are they here now? I didn't see any while I was shopping for you, so I didn't bother you about it. Anyway, it's the quietest place you can find in the area, considering the convenience and beauty of the scenery. It's only 20 kilometers to the city. In good weather, in an hour you can turn back and forth if you need something. Tourists have taken a liking to the opposite shores. There are no available sites for them here. I bought you groceries for a week, as you asked. Everything on the list. Something in the refrigerator, something in the basement. I'll show you around. Okay, thank you. And this place, let me point out, continued to persuade Hunter agent, is chosen with a perspective just for you. One day you'll be able to buy the neighboring plot, and then there won't be a single obstacle left. You're a famous writer, aren't you? Have you made inquiries yet? Well, you should know your clients by sight. I read your sunshine over the city in a heartbeat. For professional reasons, no offense, Hunter, just out of interest. And how did you like the novel? Objectively. Objective? What's that supposed to mean? Very subtly captured all the details of city life, how the inhabitant of the stone jungle was pulverized, how infantile and suggestible he became, and all this against the background of a detective story. Just brilliant. Wow, Hunter was genuinely impressed. Yes, you'd make an excellent book reviewer. Have you tried blogging? Oh, come on, it's from the heart. Real estate feeds me. Reading is just a hobby. Let's go inside, shall we? Come on, let's go. After talking all the details over with the agent, Hunter was finally rid of his endless pleasantries and left alone in the house. When the noise of the engine lurking around the corner of the car became silent, Hunter was stunned by a silence like he had never known. Amazing, and it happens. The weather outside was windless, and the bright sun was shining through the dark and mighty spruce and pine trees, which were already slanting toward the west. There were no birds, no creaking of trunks, no rustling of red maples and young oaks that grew near the house. There was only the slight groaning of the floorboards as Hunter walked through the rooms, putting away the linens in the closets and preparing the desk for future work. Even goosebumps sometimes ran down his back from the strange feeling of his own, almost non-existence, as if the world had suddenly lost sight of him and wasn't going to look for him. The small hall turned out to have a fireplace. The agent assured Hunter that it was working. Even a pile of dry wood lay beside it. For the sake of interest, Hunter opened the damper, threw a couple of logs into the hearth, put some newspapers under them, in which the laptop was wrapped, and struck a match. The fire lit quickly, and the draft was excellent. Great! At night he would sit here, working out plots in his mind and sipping an Irish drink. As he sat in the chair by the fireplace, he realized that he was desperately sleepy. The packing, the journey, and the changes had tired him out quite a bit. Having made the bed with new linen, Hunter, without undressing, lay down on top of the blanket, and in a minute he fell into a deep sleep. He was awakened by the shouts coming from outside the house, which were not so loud, but they were clearly audible against the silence. Hunter thought that some unexpected guests had arrived, but he had not given his new address to anyone, precisely to avoid such visits. He got up, went out on the veranda and looked around. There was no one on the front lawn, only his car. The sun had long since set. The stars were burning brightly in the dark sky. Not illuminated here by the glow of the city lights, grasshoppers were chirping in the grass, which had not been heard during the day, and there were those cries again. Only now did he recognize their source. They were coming from the house opposite, from a room on the first floor, in the window of which the reddish light of a lamp was barely visible. Two people were arguing, a woman and a man. Hunter could not make out the words, but the raised tones indicated that the matter was moving toward a fight. That's the last thing we need. The agent claimed that the neighbors were hardly ever here and that he'd never seen them. What an asshole. Yes, his sentimental plans had been invaded by unexpected nuances that would somehow have to be reckoned with. Hunter went back into the house, took a beer out of the refrigerator, sat down at the desk, and opened his laptop. The Dickens family was a very ordinary American family, no better or worse than any other. He wrote and heard it loud and clear. And don't you dare meddle in my life again. I know it was you who killed. Hunter shuddered. From the last words of the phrase, his heart beat fast. The woman had said this on the street, apparently running out of that house. Then there was the sound of a car door slamming shut, the muffled roar of a running engine, and the rustle of tires scattering gravel. Hunter looked at his watch, 1:30. He sat a little by the fireplace with a beer, thinking about something far from the vicissitudes of the planned novel. At 3 o'clock the electronic alarm clock beat, startling him and bringing him back to reality again, having forgotten to turn it off. In the city, Hunter was always up at 3 a.m. while everyone who could disturb him was still asleep. He had until 8 a.m. to jot something down on paper, and at 8 a.m. his secretary would come in and take it away. After the death of his wife, he continued to get up on the alarm clock, inwardly resisting the changed circumstances. He took paper, but except for scribbling crossed-out paragraphs, he could not get anything out. Resistance was useless. It only took away the last strength from the creative process. The secretary Stella also came at first, waited silently for an hour, not wanting to somehow announce her presence, and also quietly disappeared, realizing that there would be no work for her again, and after a month she quit. Although Hunter continued to pay her salary regardless of whether or not she had a workload. The alarm clock kept ringing at 3 o'clock, and Hunter, like a ghost who had lost his memory, habitually sat down at his desk and played the role of a writer until 8 o'clock. The first night in the new place did not bring any special results. 4 pages of confused text, full of stylistic and semantic errors. On the second and third night, the screams from the neighbors only intensified. They lasted from 12 to 4 a.m. and ended the same way. the woman would shout one last catchy phrase, slam the car door, and run off somewhere else. Work on the book stalled again. In the morning after the third sleepless night, Hunter decided to visit the restless couple and have a serious talk with them. After all, he had every right to make his claims against them. The law has not yet been abolished, even if we take into account that on the site of the lake, there were only one neighbor. But when the doorbell rang, no one from the house came out. He tried peering in and knocking on the windows, but they were tightly curtained. The two-story building showed no signs of life. It was also surprising that the car the woman used to leave each time never appeared on the only road leading into town. That road was clearly visible from Hunter's window, but there was no other way for Hunter to leave this forest edge with the two structures anywhere nearby. It was unclear how the car had managed to drive off the property without escaping his attention. Returning back in the evening, he hadn't seen her either. Maybe it had happened during the day while he was asleep. Today he sat out on the veranda until just before sunset on purpose, trying to spot any sign of movement on the neighboring property, but all was quiet, just as it had been the first day he'd been here. There was only the flutter of a curtain in a first-floor window, as if someone had glimpsed a glimpse and then disappeared. At night, however, the same pattern was repeated, the shouting, the clatter of falling chairs, the clinking of dishes. It even seemed that another voice, a child's, had joined the duet. Hunter couldn't take it anymore and called the police. "Captain Jones, is this it? Hello." Trying to speak calmly and evenly began Hunter. "I'd like to report a disturbance. My neighbors have been making a lot of noise for the fourth night in a row. Can you give me the address, please? It's a lake. I don't know the address yet. I've recently settled here, but there are only 2 houses in the whole neighborhood. Mine and those rowdy neighbors. So I know where it is, but do you live in a smaller house or a 2-story? The smaller one, I only have a loft. And the screams are coming from the 2-story. Well, accordingly, there was silence on the other end. Hello?" Hunter said loudly, "Are you still there? Can you hear me?" Yes, I can." "And you were talking to the former owner of the house. About what?" Hunter was a little surprised at the question about anything. "Did he tell you anything about the house? The agent handled the purchase. I only talked to him. And what does that matter?" "I see." Sighing, Captain Jones said, "Understand what?" Hunter was already starting to get annoyed by the strange logic of the conversation. "Are you sure?" In the same vein, continued the captain, "That is not some tourists." "What tourists? This is a private area. There are no tourists here. A woman is arguing with a man, and today I also heard a child's voice. The light is on in the window of the first floor. Why would a tourist go into someone's house and yell at the whole neighborhood?" That's right. The captain agreed. "Okay, we'll figure it out. So you're coming? How are you going to deal with it? Because the neighbors are not there during the day. Right now, we have all the cars involved. There's a little trouble in town. An interception plan has been announced, but don't worry, as soon as we get a chance, we'll take action. And I would still advise you to talk to the former owner of the house." Hunter disconnected the connection and threw the cell phone on the table without even saying goodbye. Some strange captain, after thinking for a while, dialed the agent's number. "Hunter, what's wrong?" The voice in the receiver sounded sleepy and slightly scared. Hunter looked at the clock. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Dan completely forgot what time it was now. "Daniel, sorry to wake you up in the middle of the night. I just have one question for you." "Yes. Did you ever speak to the previous owner of this house?" Agent Daniel, he thought about it for a while. No, his kids handled the deed. Is there something wrong with the paperwork? No, there's just a hell of a thing going on with these neighbors. You said they wouldn't bother me, but they're fighting every night, and I can't wait to get back to town. Oh, I'm sorry, Hunter. I've never even seen them, and from what I could tell, it looked like it was supposed to be quiet. Believe me, I in no way meant to mislead you. Why are you asking about the previous owner? No reason. The police told me to talk to him. The police? But that's hardly possible, and they should know better. Why not? You see, Hunter, the previous owner is in a somewhat inadequate state at the moment, in an asylum. A year now, that's why the kids did the deal. It doesn't get any easier by the hour. Hunter said in a low voice. Okay, sorry again for waking you up. Good night. It's nothing, Hunter, it's my job, and you call me if you need anything, at any time as it suits you. I'll try to find out more about the neighbors. At 4 a.m. as it should be, the car engine roared and the neighbor's ghostly car, on an incomprehensible route, swept away. This time the woman shouted, "It will come back to you. Mark my words, it will." Hunter typed this on the laptop screen in large letters. He grinned in a sort of unnatural smile and left for the bedroom. The next night, Hunter, having managed to write 5 more pages of text, closed the laptop and looked at the clock 10 minutes past 1. He took the last bottle of beer out of the fridge and sat down by the fireplace, waiting for a new show in the neighbor's house. But the screams didn't start, and at 2 o'clock it was quiet, and at 3:30. It looked strange already. Hunter went to the window. The lamp on the first floor opposite was not burning either. Had they really gone away? Had the long-awaited peace and freedom? But before he could rejoice at such a thought, he noticed that in the windows of the second floor, light flickered, so could shine only a hand lamp, quickly moving the beam from corner to corner. This time it really could be either tourists or thieves. Should we call the police again? Hunter immediately discarded the idea. Useless. He took a heavy poker from the fireplace and decided to find out what was wrong with those damned neighbors. Normally such boldness was not Hunter's usual characteristic, but this time something made him risk it, something he couldn't explain to himself. The door to the neighbor's house was slightly ajar, and Hunter stepped cautiously inside, lighting the way with his cell phone flashlight. The first-floor living room was almost empty, just a table, a huge antique mirror, a leather couch, and 3 chairs. It was all covered with a transparent tall cloth. It didn't look like anyone lived here permanently at all. But maybe the owners had disappeared today because they'd finished moving in, taking all their belongings with them. There was clearly someone walking around on the second floor, the lights still flickering randomly from side to side. Hunter walked up the narrow curving staircase to the left and turned off the flashlight on his phone. The source of the light that had attracted him was in one of the bedrooms. Hunter's heart beat faster and louder. He felt the blood rush to his face, his right hand gripping the handle of the poker to the point of pain. He entered the hallowed room and saw a man from the back, bent over and looking at something on the bed. "Hey!" Hunter's voice sounded so loud that he was startled by it himself. The man straightened up sharply and turned around, blinding Hunter with the beam of the flashlight. "What the hell?" he shouted. "Who are you? Who are you?" Covering his eyes with his palm, Hunter asked, "What do you want in someone else's house?" "Police Officer Clark." He introduced himself. "Are you the owner? Drop what's in your hand." When Hunter was able to look at the man, he saw a young man in a police uniform, but there was something not quite right about his official closet, something Hunter couldn't quite understand, but he noted it to himself. "I'm a neighbor," he said. I saw the light and came to see who was snooping around in the middle of the night. It's the third day I've been waiting for you. What's taking so long? What do you mean, waiting? The guy asked me again. I called the station. They said they'd take care of it. You're from the city, aren't you? From the city. But now, Hunter said, the owners have moved out, so it's too late for you. I used to come here a lot, and I've had complaints before. Oh, yeah. Yes, but it's been quiet for a while now. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Hunter objected. It hasn't been quiet for me lately. Let's go outside, shall we? Let's go outside. They went out on the veranda, and it was already in full bloom outside. The police car in which the officer had come was parked at the far corner of the house. On the way here, Hunter hadn't even noticed it. The officer pushed his cap back and lit a cigarette, letting the smoke drift upward, squinting. Did you see that? He asked, pointing with his hand. The wire broke, so there's no light in the house. Did you have a strong wind the other day? Hunter looked in the direction he was pointing, the cable sagging in the leaves, a black ribbon against the maple trees. There was no wind. Hunter was surprised. Yesterday the lights were still on the first floor. You'd better call an electrician, or you're going to get a short circuit, and if there's a fire, it could get you. And Officer Clark gave Hunter a hard look. All right, I will. Thank you for coming. As they say, always on the lookout. The officer joked, carefully put out his cigarette butt with his shoe, and got into the car. Have a good day. What's your name? Hunter. Have a good day, Hunter. The older model Ford turned around and pulled onto the road. Hunter followed it with his eyes and only at the last moment noticed that on the side of the car in white letters on a blue stripe, it was written not police, but just service. Didn't have time to change it or what? He thought. He grinned to himself and went into the house. That night Hunter dreamed that he was running along a deserted night highway, feeling that his wife was in some kind of trouble, and the faster he ran, the more and more anxiety squeezed his racing heart. He no longer merely felt, but almost knew that it was so, that his wife was in danger. The road became progressively hotter until his bare feet began to sink into the loose asphalt, slowing his movements. Finally, he saw the raging flames of the fire ahead and heard Margaret screaming. She was crying for help and saying, "It will come back to you. Mark my words, it will." Hunter was almost already stuck in one place, unable to move, and there were only 10 meters to the burning car, inside which his wife was thrashing around. He stretched helplessly his hands and tried to say something in response, but his tongue did not obey him, and in front of the car, the secretary Stella and his wife's friend Melissa, with whom Hunter had had a short affair before the wedding, were running around. They were pouring gasoline from a canister, which made the flames grow even stronger, and then there was a deafening explosion, and the hot pieces of the car flew in different directions and, falling from a height, hit the ground unnaturally loudly. Hunter woke up. Someone was banging forcefully on the door. He jumped out of bed, tangled in the blanket that had fallen to the floor, and banged his head on the nightstand, cursing. He got up and, trying to move carefully, went to open the door. When he opened it, determined to scold the knocker for his overzealousness, he found no one at the door. But the knocking had been going on a second ago, hadn't it? The intruder could not have been so quickly out of sight. Hunter went out on the veranda and looked around. No, there was no one anywhere. Was the furious knocking a continuation of the dream? Quite possibly, considering that he had been mentally strained lately, especially on this night. What's a mental workout? To be honest, Hunter was close to a nervous breakdown, though he didn't want to admit it to himself. Hunter walked into the house, went into the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. Dan, I'm out of beer. We'd have to go into town anyway, for groceries, an electrician, and the police station. Yeah, the police station was the place to go to say a few nice things to them and find out what was wrong with the previous owner of his house. The first thing he did was to stop by the station. The officer on duty wrote down his passport information, issued him a pass, and pointed out the office of Captain Jones, with whom Hunter had talked on the phone the first night. The captain, fortunately, was in attendance. Hunter knocked on the door and entered. "May I?" he asked politely. "Come in," replied the captain. He was a man in his 50s, with a bushy mustache, sparse hair on his head, and eyes that looked surprised all the time. "I'm Hunter. We spoke to you a few days ago on the phone about the noise from the neighbors at the lake house." The captain rolled his bulging eyes as if trying to recall the fact Hunter had mentioned, then closed them and rubbed his eyelids with his fingers. "Sorry," he said. "Intermittent proctosis. I wouldn't wish it on an enemy. It's from varicose veins in the eye socket. That's what the doctor says, but I'll tell you what it's from. All that paperwork you have to go through all day, that's the real cause. So what about your house? That's what I wanted to ask you." A little puzzled, Hunter said. "Right." The captain looked at him again in surprise. "Hunter, the lake house, yes, it was. So did you talk to the former owner?" "No, since that's not possible. He happens to be in a mental institution since some time." Wow! This time the captain was really surprised. It was to be expected, though. "Why?" "Well, how can I tell you? At one time he also complained about the noise in the neighbor's house. I actually went there myself 4 times, when I was a junior officer. But the thing is, no one's lived in that house for 6 years. How's that?" Now it was Hunter's turn to round his eyes. Like this. The captain splashed his hands. "We all know the story here. It's strange that your agent didn't say anything about it. Although, of course, it has nothing to do with your house. To accuse agents in silence such sensitive information, there is no formal reason. What's the story? Can you explain it to me?" 6 years ago, the captain began. One Christmas night, there was a tragedy, the reasons for which remain a mystery. The husband shot his wife and young son and hanged himself in his office on the first floor without even leaving a note, as is often the case in such cases. What was the reason for this was never found out. An officer was in charge of the case, but he had no time to investigate it to the end. He himself was killed in the line of duty, apprehending a prisoner who had escaped from the colony. "Wait, Hunter," interrupted Captain Hunter. "You said Officer Clark?" "Yes. Does that name mean anything to you? But how is that possible?" "What?" "I saw this officer tonight with a flashlight checking out a neighbor's house." The captain leaned back in his chair and began to move his eyes around again. "I'm afraid," he said after a pause, "that you've been misled by someone. Officer Clark couldn't have been in that house that night. But I talked to him the same way I'm talking to you now, so why would I make anything up? Let's go over the facts again." The captain continued calmly. "No one has lived in that house you're talking about for 6 years. That's one. And Officer Clark hasn't been able to talk to anyone in the last 4 years because the dead can't talk to the living. That's 2. As far as I can see, these facts are irrefutable, and it makes no common sense to dispute them." So Hunter continued, "I'm either crazy or someone is trying to play games with me?" "You said it yourself." With an upward-pointing finger, the captain summarized, "I'd be more inclined to the second option. But I'm sorry, the story with the former owner of your house can confuse anyone, and considering that you, as far as I know, are a writer, You must have an excellent imagination, and the sleep of the mind, as you know, breeds monsters. Again, I'm sorry if my logic seems offensive to you, but I'm an investigator. I have to think in a completely different way than you do." Hunter was in a stupor, his thoughts rushing around in his head, pushing each other apart. Who could have played such a cruel joke on him? And most importantly, for what purpose? He had never had such desperate enemies before. He ruled out his own insanity at once. What does it have to do with being a writer? Can't writers think logically? They can think logically, maybe even better than investigators. The task of a writer, especially if he writes fiction, is to mislead the reader, to give him at the very beginning of false guidelines, so that until the very last page, he could not guess what, in fact, the whole trick of the events described. The writer is above logic, because logic is only a linear tool, and you have to solve systemic problems and dive into parallel connections, and therefore know what each cog in the mechanism of a tangled plot serves. No, he's not crazy. The tragedy that had happened to his wife, of course, had shaken his nerves, but he had come to the lake full of optimism, and the noise in the house was not a figment of his imagination, nor was today's conversation with the late Officer Clark. So Hunter spoke again. "After I called you, you never sent anyone out to the lake?" "No one." The captain shook his head reassuringly. "We're still in a state of emergency, and there's no cars available and no men. What am I supposed to do now?" Hunter waved his hands. "What do you mean?" "If, God forbid, something strange happens again, where should I go besides a psychiatrist? If anything seriously jeopardizes your life, then, of course, call the station. Otherwise, I'm afraid we can't help you. Not because I doubt your judgment, but because resources are limited, and when we get things sorted out, I'll send a man to look at the house if you like, but that won't be for a while." Hunter remembered. "I need to find an electrician somewhere in town. There's a broken wire in that house, hanging from a tree. It could short out." "A wire? Don't worry, it won't short out. The house has been blacked out for years." But Hunter wanted to talk about the light on the first floor, but immediately stopped, not wanting to continue the slippery subject. "Do you have any weapons?" Suddenly the captain asked. What kind of weapon?" "For self-defense," Jones clarified. "It could be tourists or treasure hunters snooping around abandoned houses, scare them, if anything." "No, I don't have any weapons." "Then I suggest you get one." Again, closing his eyes, said the captain, "In your situation, think useful. I don't have any documents to buy a weapon." "You at least buy a bat. Some tin cannot so frighten the hooligans as a good baseball bat. We got a store near the station, a gun store. You'll find something suitable. Don't tell them I told you that. Just keep it between us." "All right," Hunter replied and headed for the office. "I'll think about it." "Goodbye. Have a good day," said the captain, and again, as if nothing had happened, stared at his papers. Pensively wandering down the corridor of the station, Hunter noticed something unusual on the wall. Perhaps if he hadn't been so absorbed in his thoughts, he would have passed it by, but something in his subconscious seemed to nudge him and make him look at the wall. It was a board with pictures of people in police uniforms. At the top, in large gold letters, it said, "Our Heroes," and among the pictures, Hunter saw a familiar face. It was Officer Clark. Under the photo in small print, it said that he had died heroically on an operation to apprehend a dangerous criminal, having arrested him, but he himself had been mortally wounded. And yes, that was 4 years ago. It was a hot evening, and it was impossible to stay in the house. Hunter took chairs and 3 bottles of fresh beer to the veranda, sat down and carefully examined the neighbor's house, trying not to miss any movement that could happen there. But everything was quiet. The silence, as on the first day, was deafening. Only somewhere in the distance behind the wall of the forest, the voices of birds were heard too, apparently tired from the mercilessly scorching, all-day sun. Hunter leaned against the chair a bat, purchased in the store, and touched with his fingers its handle, wrapped in rough rubberized tape. The weapons on the counter were available for all tastes: combat, gas, blank charges, electroshock, even bows and crossbows, but all of them required, at least, a medical certificate, and for combat weapons also a hunting ticket. He had to choose a bat, as the captain advised, which was a rather formidable weapon, and unlike the same shocker, noticeable from afar. Hunter tried to imagine the consequences of a blow with this club, looking at not long, rounded at the end spikes, even for such a purchase had to show a passport. The seller carefully wrote down all the data on the receipt and looked at Hunter glumly, as if suspecting him of some evil intention. However, he said nothing in farewell, only nodded his graying head. How stupid it all is. Instead of writing a book, he had to think about who knows what. But it was an interesting situation. No one was able to help him either. Just like that family tormented by the poltergeist he'd conceived the novel about. At least the feeling of desperate helplessness and abandonment he will be able to describe truthfully, based on his fresh and more than real experience. If only Stella, the secretary, would come in the morning again, it would be more cheerful and less disturbing. But where was she now, this Stella? Probably he had forgotten about the unhappy writer, though they had in common not only pages written in small handwriting, but also something hotter. However, I did not want to remember about it, because at the death of his wife, this hot very quickly cooled down then. To hell with it. Just as Hunter thought of Stella, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello, hello, Hunter." A cheerful female voice sounded in the receiver. "Don't you recognize it?" There was something familiar in Hunter's intonation, but the thought of Stella confused him. "It's Melissa." Without waiting for an answer, the woman clarified the situation. "I changed my SIM card, so I'm calling all my old friends to tell them the new number. How are you? I haven't seen you in a while. Have you started writing?" It was Melissa, the late wife's girlfriend, the one with whom Hunter had a fleeting affair just before his wedding. I don't know why, but he was glad to see her, though he tried not to show it. "Yeah, I'm Melissa. In fact, you are like from the past life, while I was depressed. Time stretched slowly, but as if I came to my senses, and as if I woke up in a boat, but I have no weight, and I do not know how and where to go." "Well, I see," Melissa noticed. "Your imagination is all right, so you will live. And you too." Hunter objected. "Back where?" "It's about fantasy," Hunter clarified. "I had an unpleasant conversation with the captain today. He reproached me, as if by the way, for being too imaginative." "What captain? Are they still bugging you about the accident?" "No, it's something else." "What happened? Where the hell are you right now? I can hear the desperation in your voice now." "I've been out of town for 2 weeks. I bought a house by the lake, moved in for the summer to write a book." "Oh, come on. And I came by your place just a week ago, kissed your doorstep, and went home. And no one at the publisher's office is wondering where you've disappeared to. How's the book coming along?" Hunter was pleased to hear that not everyone has forgotten about him after all. Fans and acolytes were not counted. These on the wave of success, he will always be needed. One could hear that Melissa was now genuinely interested in him. To be honest, sighed into the tube, Hunter, the answer is negative. Nothing is written, And not because the ideas have dried up. There are ideas, but because my neighbors turned out to be crazy. Yes, and also existing, as the captain hinted, only in my imagination. You've had it rough, Hunter. What bad luck is and how to deal with it. Listen, of course, I will not impose my society on you, but just by the way, in the city, it is so stuffy here, I was going just somewhere away from the asphalt to hide. I haven't figured out any special escape routes for myself. Maybe. Isn't that the big lake near the town of Vecta? Yeah, that's it. Hunter confirmed it. We used to compete there once. It's a deep lake, perfect for our sport. So what did you want to say about the trails? Hunter, if you need company, but for 2-3 days, I could make my route right through your dacha. I'm not insisting. It's just your voice, so I suggested it. Inwardly, Hunter was even excited by this suggestion. A close person, and even more so a woman, would be more convenient for him now than ever, but he had to pause before answering, so as not to give Melissa his hasty joy. Come, to hell with the book. I'll have time for it. No, Hunter. Melissa spoke up. I will not distract you from the book. You write as much as you want. I'll go snorkeling and sunbathing, and I'll take care of the household, if you let me, and we'll talk at sunset, and remember our best years. I'll be like a mouse. P. Hunter laughed. Come on, mouse, come on over. From our town to Vecta, about 70 kilometers, and from Vecta to the Lake 20, you'll get there in an hour and a half. I'm waiting. Well then, see you in the ambulance. I'll be on my way. I'm just getting gas. See you later. The thought of Melissa's imminent arrival gave Hunter some confidence and a desire to show some activity. He got up and, taking his bat with him, went to take another look at the neighbor's house before going inside. He checked the perimeter once more, assuming the presence of ghosts. Although it was frightening and popped into his head, he still didn't agree. There had to be a rational explanation for everything. Strange stubbornness for a man writing about poltergeists. But maybe the most stubborn of the nationalists, the most fearful of everything otherworldly and without logical support. So perhaps they protect their sanity from a breakdown. And this time we managed to find something. The low shrubbery, shaggy and killed by wild ivy, at the far corner of the house had one oddity. If in other places maples began immediately behind it, in one between it and the trees, there was a space of 4 meters. Hunter crouched down and poked his bat into a tangle of branches, the bat hitting something hard. He pulled the branches apart with his hands, and there it was. Behind the bush was a piece of wooden fence, painted green, and 2 hooks, dressed in hinges on 2 posts, between which there was a distance of 3 meters. Getting it off the hinges was not particularly difficult for Hunter. It was not so heavy due to the fact that the bushes seemed artificial. At first glance, however, it was impossible to distinguish them from the real ones, and Hunter saw a barely traveled road descending the hill on which the house stood and disappearing among the spruce trees. But what did the neighbors need this secret path for? Strange, though it was much easier to accept than a car disappearing into the night without a trace. Determined to find out everything to the end, Hunter followed the road, wanting to find out where it led. The road looped briefly through the woods, and after about 10 minutes of walking, it turned sharply to the right at the lake. So, the main route along the high shore on the left, it never came out, going around the lake in the opposite direction. Everything became clear with this. Now maybe we could find something interesting inside the house as well. In the daylight, the interior did not look so neglected. The furniture tucked away under tulle or plastic sheeting, alternating with objects that were not protected from the dust settling on them. Hunter ran a finger along the antique dresser. Yes, the place hadn't been cleaned in months. In the cramped hallway leading to the dining room, however, an ancient pendulum clock was running smoothly, only 7 minutes behind the correct time. It had been started recently, for the weight on the chain had barely traveled half of its proper distance. In the dining room, Hunter found on the floor a tin bowl of food for an animal, maybe a small dog or a big cat. Drinking water had not had time to evaporate from another bowl, signs of someone's recent presence alternating oddly with desolation. After checking the second floor, Hunter went down to the first floor again and reached the study where the lamp burned at night. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, the only room he couldn't get into, and it was interesting. He kicked the lock as hard as he could, and the door opened. Not a courteous gesture on his part, but he couldn't do otherwise. He was too sore from the trouble he'd been having lately. There weren't many things in the office. A desk, armchairs, and cabinets with books and files along 3 walls. The window was tightly shuttered, and on the desk was the same lamp with the red, Chinese-style shade that had been burning earlier, despite the lack of electricity in the house. Hunter tried to turn it on. No, granted, it didn't work. He strolled along the racks of books, looking at the titles on the spines. Walter Scott, Dostoevsky, Stephen King, books on astrology, a complete mix of genres and tastes of whoever had assembled this collection. And suddenly Hunter Wilson, Sun Over the City. Why is this here? Next to his latest novel were other, earlier novels and short stories, a complete collection such as even he himself did not have. 8 volumes, what a turn! Were the screaming owners of this house among his most loyal fans? Hunter picked up the Sun Over the City and opened the front. Across it, in large, curlicube letters, it said, "Dear Kathy, in kind remembrance from the author." It was his handwriting, his autograph. Apparently, a fan named Kathy not only liked to read it, but also did not miss meetings with readers, of which Hunter had dozens in the last year. Of his acquaintances, he didn't have anyone named Kathy, a name he would surely remember. Suddenly the phone rang, and the book fell out of Hunter's hands. He looked at the screen. It was the agent calling. "Yes, Daniel, hello." "Hunter, good evening." "Good evening. I'm calling about your neighbors. Can you talk now?" "Yes. Go ahead. I've managed to find out a few things, if you're still interested." "Sure, I got some details about them too." "Yes. What kind of details?" "Turns out they were fans of mine. At least one of them was. The library I found in the house has my complete works. Can you believe it?" "You broke into the house?" Daniel asked excitedly. "It's not locked, and no one has lived in the house for a long time." "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about." The agent began. "The owner of the house, one John Parker, as it turned out, he died 6 years ago. I assure you, I knew nothing about that or the tragedy that took place in the house." "Yeah, I'm aware of that." Agent Hunter was reassured, "and I have no beef with you." But more than that, Daniel interrupted him and immediately paused for a moment. How to put it? "You, Hunter, had something to do with that tragedy." "Me?" "Not personally, of course, but indirectly through my books. It's not your fault, of course, but nevertheless. Kathy, John's wife, was an ardent admirer of yours, never missed a meeting, and no publication escaped her notice. She would sometimes ask her husband to fill in for her at an autograph session if she couldn't attend for some reason. She probably fell asleep with your book in her hands. In general, her husband began to suspect that she is looking for with you not only reading contact, but counting on something more." "In what sense?" "In the sense that her husband suspected her of cheating on him." "What the hell is that?" I think, Daniel pointed out, it happens to women, and their idols often go out of their way to meet such fans. I'm sorry, I don't mean you at all, but you do realize that women take literature too personally, transferring the characteristics of their characters onto the author. I don't know what the poor woman's feelings were, but her irrepressible passion for reading led to what happened on Christmas night. A nightmare. I don't want to go into all the details again. I guess if you know something, you know it too. But it takes your imagination to imagine the chain of events that went down like that, Hunter. How did you even find out about this? Talk to the former owner of your house. In the psych ward. That's right. I took the trouble to go and see him. He's not that crazy. I'll tell you that much. He was aware of the whole thing. At one time, he had a very close relationship with the neighbors, but when things got heated between the couple, he didn't want to be friends anymore. I don't know. It seemed to me that he had a thing for Kathy. He spoke of her with a special piety. It was like he had a premonition of this kind of ending. He said that John had been completely insane since the fall and all through the early winter before Christmas. He'd gone off the rails, as they call it. They had a big fight. Kevin from the asylum, the one who lived in your house, even managed to buy the only road into town and forbade John to use it. He had to take a detour to Vecta, across the lake. That's all I've been able to dig up. Very valuable information, said Hunter. Thank you very much, Daniel, for doing this work. Don't mention it, Hunter. I've missed some important details myself, so I'll learn a lesson. And as for the noise you mentioned, the culprits are to be found elsewhere. You understand that the former owners have nothing to do with it, unless by will their house passed to some of the Hares, but in this direction my searches did not yield any results. Here it is necessary to involve some lawyers. Got it. Hunter summarized. Thank you again. If there is anything new, be sure to call me. I will. Hunter put the phone away, picked up the fallen book from the floor, and opened the autographed page again. The story with the neighbors might now be quite complete, if it weren't for one thing, but... Huge letters throbbed in his head. How could he sign Kathy's book this year? If she and her husband had died 6 years ago, who had been faithfully adding to the collection in the abandoned house all those 6 years anyway? And the screams he heard at night were not hallucinations, a man and a woman arguing, and a baby crying. Clarity, by and large, in the whole affair was not added. Dragging the bat along the ground, Hunter walked back to his house, and it was only as he crossed the road that he noticed the light green Nissan nestled behind his Mazda. On the veranda sat Melissa and smiled. Well, hello there, Ryder, she said cheerfully. Were you hunting a mammoth? How pleasant her voice sounded, in the midst of this ominous evening silence. Hello, friend, he answered, went up to the veranda to the guest and kissed her on the lips. You don't know what mammoths are here sometimes. Your weapons are formidable. Pointing to the bat, Melissa said, That's all I'm supposed to have. Melissa rummaged in her purse and took out a small, shiny gun. I have something too, she said. Jesus, Hunter exclaimed. We got a whole gang here now. What do you need a gun for? Did you think I turned into a maniac and hold hostages in the basement? Melissa laughed. No, it's just that your voice on the phone seemed to me a little frightened. And now I see that I did not just think that. It's not a combat one. It's a starter. I brought it with me from one of the competitions. I don't dive now. My breathing is not the same. But sometimes they call me to judge, so it's my weapon of choice. It makes a hell of a lot of noise, scares even a bear away. Too bad you're not competing anymore, said Hunter. I remember when you could hold your breath for 5 minutes. Has your record been broken yet? Not in the state yet, but in the world I've never even come close. It's fantastic minutes out there. Free divers have been going over 10 minutes for a long time. For me, it's just out of the realm of fantasy. Surprised Hunter. Have they learned to stop the heart like you? That's your trick. I remember it particularly well. Come on. Melissa waved her hand. Where can I get to these tricks now? I'm an old woman. I can't compete with young people now. But I remember you exactly as you are, and you haven't changed a bit, as you were a beauty, and you still are. I must have gotten old. I've gone gray, said Melissa, stroking Hunter's hair. So unusual, but gray hair suits you. Somehow you've grown up even. Why isn't your car in the garage? I went in the garage, but I couldn't get the door open. Is it true that there's a maniac at night? It's filled to the ceiling with old stuff. I couldn't get my hands on the car. Let's go inside. You must be hungry. We'll fix you a light supper. Come on. With Melissa in the house, time passed quickly for Hunter. Even the ghosts seemed frightened by her presence. Not once over the next 7 days, no more disturbing screams, creaks, or the red lamp in the window across the street. Hunter again began waking at 3 a.m., and until 8 a.m., he modeled the paper with an unstoppable stream of plot twists for the novel. He transferred his benevolence even to the most fierce of his heroes, Poltergeist. It turned out that the noisy spirit simply had unrequited feelings for the daughter of a long-suffering family who did not want to play with him and in every way avoided his attention. The spirit even thought of interrupting his ghostly existence from the excess, not divided feelings, and gave the girl a way to get rid of him once and for all. And the girl was about to do it when she suddenly realized that it was wrong, that Poltergeist is just a wild, unbridled creature, longing to be loved and needed, that he also deserves to get the opportunity to go to the side of the world. And well, Hunter himself was surprised at this direction of his thoughts. According to the original plan, the novel was to be a denunciation of human cowardice and duplicity, when the created public good is possible only within the framework of relative well-being, the benefactors themselves, but only a real danger to overstep the personal boundaries of good-hearted citizens, as they immediately grow thorns, detaching themselves from the situation and caring only about themselves. Melissa liked the new plot much better. Between swimming at the lake and cooking lunches, she took over as Stella's secretary, reprinting text from paper onto the monitor screen. She was slow at it, but Hunter was glad she was. The novel was nearing completion, and in any case he had time to send it to the publisher before September, who, to his credit, had stopped bothering him with endless hints of pressing deadlines. But if the paper feelings had come closer to their finale, the real feelings that had settled in this house with Melissa's arrival were only gaining momentum. Their fleeting connection from the past had taken on new colors. They were now both moderately wise, moderately passionate, and moderately able to account for their actions, and there was nothing to prevent their intimacy from being platonic to bodily a few days later. Enough time had passed since the death of Margaret's wife, and Melissa, as far as Hunter could understand, had not had a steady partner in the city since their separation. It seemed to Hunter that things were finally getting better in his life. The appearance of Melissa in the house, he took it as a reward for the recent agony. It was still unclear how, for example, the meeting with the non-existent Officer Clark had come to seem like a dream. Why? His nerves were so tense that he could dream anything and mistake it for reality. He wasn't just thinking about it, he was convincing himself of it, as if he were living in the image of a madman walking along the border separating illusion from reality. People tend to convince themselves that something didn't really happen in their past, or if they did, it was different in some way, with nuances that could justify them. They are not villains or crazy. They have all read children's fairy tales. They know where good and bad are. They are just weak at times, as if weakness justifies any mistake. The doubts, driven to the bottom of his soul, scraped unpleasantly from the creek, giving Hunter a noise in his head, and only when he took paper in his hands and began to write, the noise subsided, giving way to other people's emotions, becoming for 5 hours as if they were his own. On one such morning at 8:30, when Hunter had set his novel down, he went out on the veranda, smiling absent-mindedly and to the end, not believing in the successful completion of his work. The heat, even on the morrow, was unwilling to abate. The windows open in the house did not save from the stuffiness, and the cold beer the body could no longer fit. Hunter went to his favorite chair and saw some postcard, so it seemed to him. Maybe in his heart he was waiting for congratulations from all parts of the country. He took it in his hands, looked at it, and his heart sank into his heels. No, not this again. What the hell? Why now? It can't be like this. It was a photograph of his late wife's car engulfed in flames. A photograph from the scene of the very accident that had divided his life into before and after, and which he had been trying not to think about all this time, trying to scratch out of his memory like he scratched out bad bits of text from a novel. On the back of it, as if written by a 5-year-old child, "Mark my words, he'll be back." Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, his hands trembled, and it felt like it was -40, not +20 outside. Hunter, as if in a dream, went back into the house, took a pair of scissors out of the drawer, and began to angrily cut up the photograph, putting the scraps in a neat pile on the table. Melissa came out of her bedroom and stared at him fearfully for over a minute. "Hunter," a little audibly she said. "Hunter, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Are you all right?" He looked at her uncomprehendingly, grinned half his face in a smile, and said, "They know everything." "Who do they?" "Know what?" "They know everything," Hunter repeated. "They won't leave me alone." "What do I do, Margaret?" "Hunter, come to your senses. I am Melissa." "What are you talking about? Melissa?" For a second, Hunter's eyes became clear. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, yes, Melissa, I need to." "I'll be right there. Don't go. I'll be right there." And Hunter rushed out of the house, got into his car, pushed the gas pedal to the floor, and sped down the road to town. It seemed to him that the car was going too slowly, as if a whole carload of passengers had been hitched to it from behind, and he had to get there in time. In time for what? Where to? As if someone was calling him, but the name and the place of meeting did not tell him. A wooden sign hung on a chain flashed to the right. A road to the city. Strange. Apparently some joker had ordered it to be installed here. He hadn't noticed it before. He looked in the side mirror and saw the sign again. His thoughts were all jumbled up in his head, all sorts of nonsense that he couldn't handle. No matter how he turned that sign either way, it read like a road to the city, a palindrome. And therefore there was no road that could lead him to a life-saving goal. The target was approaching and distant at the same time. He hit the brakes as hard as he could. The car skidded to the left, the gravel slamming into the bottom of the car. Stop! When the dust cloud cleared, Hunter saw the lake glistening in the sunlight ahead of him. The front wheels froze in centimeters from the cliff. His whole body shuddered with chills. He was seized with horror. Carefully, matching every movement, Hunter shifted into reverse and pulled back onto the road. Then he turned left, into the woods, where there was a slightly visible rut. He drove another 100 meters and stopped. As he struggled to unbuckle his seatbelt, He jumped out of the car, ran to a tree as if the car was about to explode. He crouched down, hiding behind the trunk, took a breath, and immediately fell into his memories, into the pieces of it that had once been carefully kicked out of his head. In the month before Margaret's tragedy, their relationship had deteriorated to the point where it was hard to imagine how these people had once genuinely loved each other. They had not spoken to each other for many days, and his wife had filed for divorce, unable to bear Stella in their house, nor her husband's completely depraved character. His sunshine over the city could not end. He was furious. Everything irritated him. Hysterics followed hysterics. Horse Stella, who had fallen in love with Hunter, was caught between two fires. On the one hand, Margaret's sizzling jealousy, and on the other, the unbridled passion of Hunter, who did not realize reality. It was as if the house had been booby-trapped and was about to blow up. The house that belonged to Margaret. In case of divorce, Hunter would lose everything. He would become a bum for no one. Not yet favored, neither by his publisher nor by the reading public. At that time, he was not yet the Hunter Wilson known at the top of the literary world. He was a nobody. Only the sun over the city could move things forward. Hunter felt it. He knew it, as any relatively talented creator knows everything about his creation before it is finally released. He needed only a month of concentrated work, only a month, but it was as if the monster was devouring the time, leaving him not a minute. Hunter had no car of his own, and he had never learned to drive. Sometimes he used his wife's car when there was an urgent need to go somewhere. That day he was going to the city too, and he didn't even remember now for what purpose. The brakes went bad. He decided not to put it off in a long box and went to a car service. That's where it happened. A stray thought, a fleeting anger that created a monster in his heart. The mechanic looked at the brake system, whistled, and said that fateful phrase. Another day and you'd be in the morgue for sure. Is it that serious? How much more serious could it be? Answered the mechanic and tapped the wheel with the key. I'm afraid I can't do it in one day. You come back tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll tell you the exact time and price. Where was he in such a hurry? Completely slipped my mind. Doesn't matter what he's attached to it. What does it matter? He had to admit to himself that the reason for his decision was not the need to go somewhere, but the simple thought that there was no need to fix the brakes now. No need. Hunter was already standing at the bus stop when it hit him. He went back to the service and took the car back, saying he would be back tomorrow, but he never came back. He got home, never got to where he was going, quietly put the car in the garage, and with a sinking heart, sat down to finish the remaining pages. Stella was finishing typing the last of the sheets she had. The work was going well. He was calm. Peace spread over his whole body in a hot spill. He smiled and wrote well, splendidly, and at the same time enjoyed the half-realized premonition, the imminent finale of a difficult head and in his own life. He knew how everything would happen, as if he were watching a movie that had already been released and in which it was now impossible to change a single scene. As if playing his part, he made another scandal in the evening. Stella ran out of the house in tears. Margaret shouted some insults, the most harmless of which was to denounce him as mediocre. He's talentless? Let's see what she says to that, if she can speak at all. Hunter answered Margaret as if with a memorized text and calmly watched her hatred turn into an uncontrollable outburst devoid of any objective meaning. It was past midnight. She too ran out in tears, got into her car, and drove away into the hazy haze of distant city lights. He knew she would never come back. There was no sign for the road to the city. It was a one-way trip only. That was it. Now he could breathe fully. He admitted it to himself. He was ready to move on. Yes, he'd thought about those Dan breaks. He'd wanted to, but they were just thoughts. Little pulses in his brain running back and forth along the neurons, and nothing more. A wish. How many desires don't a person have? He didn't mess with the breaks. He never even laid a finger on Margaret. He just saw more than the others. But that's why he's a brilliant writer. To be able to see such things, it's his gift from birth. After all, it's her car, and it's up to her to see to its condition. To hell with regret. To hell with doubt. To hell with all those feeble-minded people who made a spectacle of the dead policeman, with the books signed supposedly for Kathy, with the shouting of non-existent neighbors, with the picture of this one at last. He'll sue them too, if he has to, and he'll stomp them into the dirt. Let them try it again, you fools. Hunter came back, didn't explain anything to the confused. In a second, Hunter, who was soaking wet, ran into the house, and at the next flash saw Melissa's body sprawled on the floor in the hall. Looking around and finding no one around, Hunter ran up to her and shook her by the shoulder. "Melissa?" he shouted. "What happened? Are you all right?" There was another flash, and Hunter saw that the woman's head was smashed and lying in a pool of thick blood. "Melissa!" he screamed, but the woman didn't move or respond, and he tried to feel for a pulse on her neck, then on her wrist. Where was it, that pulse? Dan, there was no way he could detect it, but the body was still warm. The light flashed again, and Hunter's hair on his head stirred. Next to Melissa lay his bat, also bloody, and in his right hand, the woman clutched her shiny pistol that she had been bragging about. What was going on here? Why had she gone into this house alone? Why didn't she wake him up? Lightning had already incessantly illuminated the neighborhood. Hunter could now clearly see the whole picture, and just as clearly he realized that Melissa was dead, and next to her was his bat, which her head had been smashed against. We should call the police or an ambulance. Now where do we call? Hunter rushed back to his house, found his cell phone, began to dial the number with trembling fingers, and suddenly froze. What was he doing? What the hell are the police doing? All the evidence points to him. It's his bat, his fingerprints. And this is the house that's been driving him crazy for a long time. Who's gonna believe him after he told us about the ghost of Officer Clark and the ghost killers? Captain Jones would only roll his eyes, convinced that the writer, as he supposed, had driven himself into a frenzy and rattled the unfortunate woman who had risked comforting him. No, and no again. Something else is needed here. Like then? Like then? What about the car? No one suspected. His affair was over. He had a new success waiting for him. You can't just cut everything out of your life. Hunter took Melissa's breathless body in his arms and carried it to the car. Then he went back for the bat and threw it far into the woods. He would sort it out afterwards. Now the main thing was to get rid of the body. The rain was pouring down. Nothing could be seen 5 meters away. Could the real killer be following him right now? Even if he was, he wouldn't be able to see anything unless he risked a face-to-face confrontation, and then he'd have all the anger Hunter had built up inside him. It's a good thing it's raining like this. He can do it fast. He'll come back, clean up the blood in the house. No one will come to visit him in this weather. No one has seen Melissa here either. No one knows she was here, even if she was on her way to see him. So what? She just got caught in a downpour, lost control, and slid off the road into the lake. Daniel had warned her that the road could be dangerous in the rain. It would all look natural. Carefully pressing the gas, the hunter drove to the lake shore. The wipers could not cope with the flow of water. The high beam only reflected from countless drops and blinded his eyes. And in this maelstrom, the stupid sign, "The road to town," came into view again. Hunter stopped and got out of the car, already thinking how best to push it down. Suddenly there were lights everywhere, side, front, and back. Bright spotlights flashed and a siren wailed. From the mouthpiece came a loud voice, ominously emphasized by the roll of thunder. "Hunter Wilson, step away from the car and get on your knees, or we will open fire." Captain Jones sat opposite and stared unblinkingly at the wet, from head to toe Hunter. The interrogation room was small, deceptively cozy, but built according to all the rules of the genre. A table with handcuffs, soundproof walls, wide tinted glass, behind which on this side there was nothing to see, but on the other side there was someone standing there, hearing and seeing everything, seeing and hearing all the nonsense Hunter had been talking for half an hour. "Then you insist that you did not kill Melissa?" The captain repeated calmly. "No, I told you. I heard a shot and ran to that house. Why would I kill her? Why would you kill your own wife?" "What?" Hunter exclaimed. This question came out of the blue, like a hammer hitting him on the head. "What are you talking about? What's my wife got to do with it?" "You know what it has to do with her." Jones persisted. "You were wrong to think that the case would be written off as an accident. The investigation has been going on all this time, and there is a witness." "What witness?" "I don't understand you." "You understand everything, Hunter, except maybe one thing. I don't think you realized how close friends Melissa and your wife were. Melissa knew all about your complicated relationship and that you'd driven your wife to hysterics. Margaret went to Melissa's that night, and now you've eliminated a witness." "A fight? Melissa confronted you?" "You lured her into a neighbor's house and hit her over the head with a bat." "No." No, Hunter yelled. "I didn't kill her and she didn't say anything to me." Oui. "Yeah, that's bullshit. Yes, I may have wanted Margaret dead, and I may have known the brakes were bad, and I may not have wanted them fixed at the service station, and I may have driven away in a bad car, but I had nothing to do with Melissa's death. So maybe you did or knew." "There's a big difference." "Yes, I did. And I had this picture of the accident in my mind, and I wanted it to happen. Are you satisfied? Is that enough of my confession for you?" "But I didn't kill Melissa. That's crazy." "Yes, Hunter," the captain agreed. Delusions of your disturbed mind. You may not have killed Melissa, but you didn't kill Margaret. The problem is that you yourself ruined the brakes on your wife's car, and you convinced yourself that the brakes were defective through no fault of your own. Especially the car service said they never saw you in their eyes, and on the security cameras, your car was never there. You are a writer. Your inflamed mind has convinced you that you are not guilty of anything, and the brakes you ruined are supposedly an accident. But you screwed up on the most basic of things. You always write everything down in your diary. It's a habit of yours, and Melissa knew it all too well because she was in a relationship with you before you married Margaret. She had a year-long hunch that you were at fault, and she came to us to find out for sure. Melissa was convinced of her rightness when she read your confession in your diary about killing your wife. But now I assure you, you will feel better. You will finally understand yourself. Tomorrow we'll talk to you again. We'll discuss some details. But for now, I ask you to sign a non-departure order. We're reopening the criminal case. You'll have to write your novels behind bars if your guilt is proven in court. You will pardon us for this spectacle with both the house and Melissa, but any murder, as you know from your detectives, must be solved, and the criminal must receive a just punishment." Hunter looked at the captain and did not know what to say to him in reply. Yes, now he really realized what had happened a year ago to his wife. Hunter had convinced himself then that it was for the best if he wrote this scenario for himself. No guilt, no remorse. And he really believed that everything had happened by accident. His brain had simply forgotten that he had self-destructed his wife. But Melissa, what happened to her? And what play was the captain talking about? At that time, there were two people on the other side of the window, Melissa, alive and well, and a young officer who looked a lot like Clark, especially if you looked at him in the dim light. "Congratulations, Melissa," he said quietly. "I thought this show would never end. You shouldn't be a diver, but a movie star. He didn't even think you were just playing a part. Give it up." Finishing her cigarette, Melissa replied, "No one will ever get Margaret back anyway, and the bastard will get out of it one way or another. He became a popular writer. He has connections. Right, officer?" "It's hard to say now," the man shrugged. "Jones will work with him. He knows what he's doing. Thanks for coming to us with your idea. For a captain, it's the last thing on his mind. I'm sure he'll want to retire as a major, but in any case, that writer Hunter Wilson has to answer for the murder of his wife to the fullest, and we'll see how it goes in court."
Subscribe and click the bell.
Winter had come. The evenings were already quite dark outside. Second shift at school. Just finished the last class. "Maria, you have no idea what I saw," whispered one boy in my ear. "The calmest girls in the class. It's unbelievable. Do you want me to tell you in confidence? But you can't tell anyone." The girl looked at her classmate in bewilderment. Maria was not one of those who are ready to get involved in all sorts of adventures. Especially tomorrow, there were a lot of lessons to do. "Go for it. No one in our class knows about it." Another boy came up to her. "It's so cool. You'll love it." The girl packed her bag and headed for the exit. The two boys kept up with her. "So it's true what Lenka said about you? You mean the psycho?" Finally, one of the classmates went all in, and we thought it was all a lie. "I'm not afraid," said the schoolgirl resolutely. "All right, let's go, but quickly, because I have to do my homework before Mom comes." The hooligans rejoiced, lost their hands. One of them quickly ran forward. He reached the unfamiliar Maria office and yanked the door. The door was closed, but to the girl's surprise, one of the classmates quickly pulled some kind of key out of his pocket and opened it. The classroom was dark. "Keep the lights off," one of the boys ordered. "Because we care." "Come on, open the back room," he commanded. The second one in the dark finally managed to open the right room and entered it. Maria went in with them. "Well?" the girl asked them. "What's the big deal?" She looked at the barely visible silhouettes of her classmates. "You'll see." The leader shouted briskly and pushed the girl into the back room. The hooligans quickly ran out of the room. One of them held the door while the other locked it. Maria quickly got to her feet and ran to the door. "Open up. What are you doing?" She struggled. "Alex, well, let me out of here now." But the boys had already locked the study door and ran downstairs. They both chuckled quite a bit. That would be hilarious when they found her tomorrow. Would they bust their bellies laughing as they ran home? Well, good, you made duplicate keys. I can only imagine what would happen to her if she found the light and turned it on. Laughing all the way to Alex, who started the whole thing. Why the boys decided to make fun of their classmate Maria, they did not know exactly. She was just a quiet girl, and Alex always wanted to do something so that the girl experienced pain or humiliation. Maria was smart beyond her years, and that put a lot of pressure on the boys. Alex was from a dysfunctional family. He was not particularly loved there and never wanted. But Maria looked like a neat, well-groomed girl. They always came to all the meetings. She was praised for her tests and dictations. And Will was a fool. He never knew about friends. He saw Alex as some kind of important figure. That was mostly just in his language. In reality, his friend was cowardly and unreliable. Maria tried to break down the door, but the child's strength was so insignificant compared to the back room that had been stormed by more than one generation of children that it was like it was made of metal. "Mommy, Mommy," screamed the girl. "Help! Somebody! Help! Let me out!" But no one heard her. The school was completely deserted. The guard had gone around several times and didn't see anything suspicious. How long Maria had been crying, she didn't know. But at one point she realized that her eyes had gotten used to the darkness and began to see. Especially through the crack under the door there was some light. The girl got up from the floor and tried to look around. No, she shouted at the top of her voice when she saw a skeleton near the wall. No, she screamed again and lost consciousness. Outside the window it was snowing, and Alex and Will were coming home happy. They had pulled off such a big deed that they saw themselves as real heroes. On the way, the boys saw a big trash can and threw their keys into it. Both realized they had to get rid of the evidence so they wouldn't be suspected of anything. What would Maria say? They didn't care. The boys were sure that no one would believe her. An expensive car pulled up in front of a high-rise office center. A young man got out of it and headed toward the left wing, where a large sign for Jaguar Publishing hung. The guy opened the door and, without looking around, went straight to the director's office. "Hi, Max." The man tore himself away from his papers. "Are you on business or what?" "Sorry, I don't have much time." "Dad, I need money." The principal didn't hear anything new. "Can you give me some?" "Max, will I ever hear from you that you came to help me?" The man replied sternly. "Or do I have to deprive you of everything first?" "But don't start," the boy remarked. "I haven't graduated yet, and you and I agreed that I would get up to speed." Only then Mark Austin gave him a displeased look and took his wallet out of his pocket. He pulled out a few bills and tossed them defiantly on the table. "I hope that's enough," Father asked coldly. "Can you leave me alone now?" "I have a new issue of the magazine coming out." "Yes, please." Grabbing the money from the table, happily headed for Max's door. "Don't you know the word thank you at all?" Mark Austin grumbled unhappily. "Thank you." The son shouted at the top of his voice. "I'll never forget it." He began to play the comedy. "Idiot," whispered Max. With a satisfied look, went out of the publishing house. "Well, Leoka, now hold on." The guy again jumped into the car and drove towards a familiar cafe. There near the door, his friend Martin was already waiting for him. "What took you so long?" he asked unhappily. "I'm freezing here. Let's hurry up and warm up." "No problem," Martin winked at his friend. "I've just been to my father's, so I'll order." The young men ordered a pizza and a beer. The guys had been friends for years, but when they met freshman year, Max got punched in the face for his attitude. "Hey, why are you looking at me like that?" asked a fellow student, tall blonde. "It is for me that you have such a face," unhappily tried to spread his tail turkey. "Or I'll show you where you belong." "I don't give a damn about you," the boy said. "So sit down and keep your mouth shut." "What did you say?" Max jumped up from the table. "Are you trying to get in trouble?" "Somebody needs me." Martin turned away from him. "Your mirror's fooling you. Trust me, you're not so tough. Let's get out of here." The guy clenched his fists. "I'll show you which one of us needs to look at himself in the mirror." "Come on," agreed the classmate. "But don't whine and call your daddy afterwards." Max, being the son of a rich man with connections, always felt right. But he didn't know that Martin had a black belt in karate. So as soon as the guy attacked a fellow student with fists, he took him to the ground in 2 moves. For Max, it was the first time in his life he saw from the outside that he wasn't so tough. "Let me help you up." Martin held out his hand to his opponent. "I hope this will be enough." "Yes," Max replied briefly, and like a dog with his tail up, he walked back into the auditorium. Another 6 months passed, and by the end of the first year, Max and Martin became inseparable. A classmate realized that behind the arrogant nature and friend hides a sensitive and honest guy. What's what, but Max never broke his word, even if he had to answer for it. Martin over time taught the guy to control his emotions, and Max, you could say, stopped being so hot-tempered and no longer got into fights over nothing. Not only a friend had such an influence on the guy, but Martin himself realized that Max taught him to take risks and try something new in life, and the latter was always easy to deal with, even when friends got into very big trouble. Max's optimism and sense of humor helped them both get out of it. "People, I'm fed up with my ancestor and his publishing house," Max sighed. "I don't want to get involved in all this. I still have time to finish my degree, and then I have to get a job with him." "That's why I'm telling you that we need to finish our work from the beer from the bottle," answered the friend. "If we do well, we'll have our own business. You won't have to inherit your father's business anymore." Jesus, if someone had told me a few years ago that I was going to do that, I would have told them to go for it, Max laughed. "I even have to lie to my father about needing money for entertainment." "You tell him on the merry-go-round?" Martin laughed. "I'll tell you about our case. I'll tell you what, with your irrepressible power, it's the very thing. Instead of all your squabbles, you're doing a noble thing now. You're helping the whole of life, you might say." "Yeah," Max laughed. "Call me a messa." He choked on his beer. "When everyone finds out, I'll be laughed at." "Max, I don't care what other people say about us." His friend looked at him seriously. "I know that all great men started somewhere. It's not that I want to be great. It's just that I want to do something useful for others. That's what I'm all about. What's the point of being the richest?" "Well, you have everything then, what?" "Counting your money every day." "We have nothing. You and me, we started from scratch. Another man will look at us and say, maybe I can do something like that. Do you know how many years I've dreamed of getting my black belt? How much work I've done? And what? Somebody will say it'll help me defend myself in life. Oh yeah, will I catch bullets on the fly with my teeth? Or will I be able to grab a knife flying at me from behind on the fly? It's all nonsense. If it's for self-discipline, yes. Karate has helped me a lot in my life, but you can discipline yourself in more gentle ways. "Martin, I know you're right about something," my friend replied. "But I haven't gone through it all yet, so I can't look at things the way you do. You remember how many experiments Edison did, how much material didn't fit? I'm not even talking about Tesla. Nobody believed in him at all. He worked as a laborer for years just to continue his research. 2 years ago, when friends went on vacation to the river, Martin in his head flashed a strange idea. Guys came to their favorite place, but just could not recognize it. What kind of people do we have?" Martin was indignant. "Where he is, there is a constant shit." "But why can't you clean up after yourself?" The guy wouldn't stop. "You could at least put all the garbage in bags." "I hate it." "Yes, it's a good thing we didn't take the girls this time." Max rubbed his head. "You could say the whole vacation is ruined." He sighed and went to the river. There were plastic bottles, bags, disposable dishes lying everywhere. Some even floated in the river not far from the shore. The mood of the friends was at zero. Martin came over and sat down next to Max. They were both silent for a long time. Suddenly the guy jumped up. "You know, Max, if I could fix all this, I would not spare my strength," said Martin. "What do you mean?" His friend looked at him in bewilderment. "Put guards at all the vacation spots." No, a thought flashed through the boy's mind. That would be pointless. "I could make something useful out of this garbage. It's been recycled for a long time," Max said. "But you see, it doesn't work, Max. I've heard that polymers are used to make gasoline and methane in the laboratory," Martin reasoned. "Which means we're dealing with organics, right?" Well, his friend didn't understand. "What do you mean by that? I'm not a chemistry geek." "Which means we could take it all back to the original materials." A light bulb went off in Martin's head. "Hydrogen? Hydrogen?" At a loss, Max asked, "What's hydrogen got to do with it?" "I don't understand anything." "What are you trying to tell me?" "But it's so easy." The boy was delighted. "Hydrogen is the most common element on Earth, but it's always in a bound form. If we could get it freely, it would be cooler than gasoline and electricity. I think I read somewhere about hydrogen engines." The guy's starting to remember. "Martin, it's so complicated." "That's what everybody thinks," sighed the friend. "Nobody wants to do it. That's why you and I are in this mess right now. Our people aren't ready to clean up after themselves. So we have to think of something else. If you and I could get hydrogen from this garbage and develop our own hydrogen engine, do you realize what a turnaround that would be?" That's what Max has become. "I'm not in the loop on this whole thing. You want me to go around picking up trash, and then something explodes in our lab, and you and I go to the afterlife. No, thanks. I'd rather finish my econ degree someday and work at my dad's publishing house. Leave me alone. Didn't you see the movie October Sky? I didn't give up all of a sudden. Nobody believed that the main character would launch his own rocket. But he did. So we'll launch our own hydrogen engine. For the first 3 months, Martin tried to persuade Max to join his experiments, but he was reluctant. Martin began to disappear more and more often in his garage, which his father gave him. Mother of God. One day a friend of Martin's came to see him. He was looking at some test tubes and instruments, showing him something with interest. He's pointing at some kind of vessel that looks like a balloon. And that's what it is. Without distracting from his work, said suddenly there is gaseous hydrogen in a compressed state. Did you get it? In shock, asked Max. You got it from garbage. Yes, smiled Martin. From the garbage that was lying by the river. Max was so amazed by what he saw. From that day on, he visited his friend more and more often. You come with me, the guy once suggested to him. Unfortunately, for now, I have to get the raw materials myself. You want to pick up trash? Martin's friend looked at him in amazement. Are you serious? No, of course I'll go with you, he laughed. But only for fun. I want to watch you from the sidelines. Martin had been filling the old bags with bags and plastic for almost 2 hours. The full bags he was tying up and hiding so he could take them on his bike to his garage later. By God, Max approached him. Quit this dirty business. He said unhappily. You're like a bum who collects for a bottle. I don't care how I look from the outside, Martin said. You know, there was a man who planted trees in a deserted place somewhere in England. Everybody looked at him and they all turned their fingers. But then, when that very spot grew into a gorgeous forest, he and his family had a great time there. So he who laughs last laughs. And yet, after a while, Max couldn't stand it any longer and joined his friend. Getting hydrogen was no longer a problem for the boys. But to build their own engine, they needed not only knowledge, but also a lot of money. Max has to beg his father for money time and time again. So he and Martin pieced together one part after another for their project. Max was still in shock at himself. The guy loved fun girl parties. And how he traded it all in for hours of hanging out in a stinky old garage. The guy couldn't understand. Martin, Nancy won't talk to me anymore. It's like a friend's gone off the deep end. We're stuck here all the time. You want me to give my whole life to science? That's fine. Ignore him, the friend said. Your girlfriend should be a companion, a friend, not this misunderstanding with pumped-up lips. What can you talk to her about? Imagine there are very interesting conversations between a girl and a guy. Look, Max started it. I don't know how you live without girls after you made that fool. Have you forgotten about the female gender? All right, that's enough. We need to go out in public, or I'll go crazy with your hydrogen. The boy protested. We're going to a nightclub tonight. What are we going to do there? Martin looked at him in bewilderment. What, and before, rubbed his hands together in anticipation. First, we'll get drunk. Then we'll find 2 beauties and spend an unforgettable night with them. You go, but I have to work, Martin objected. Especially I have to work until morning. As you wish, but I'm going for good. I thought I'd bring you a beer. Maybe you'll cheer yourself up at least this way. I don't drink at work, the guy replied briefly and fully immersed himself in his work. Max had a stormy night. The guy rested 100%. His mother barely woke him up. The next morning, Max, have you been drinking again? His father looked at him unhappily. All Martin knew all your pocket money. The boy wasn't happy himself. His head was rattling at the seams and he couldn't even get out of bed. I'd rather have his hydrogen chasing him, he thought. You wouldn't have a headache in the morning. After that, Max's late-night drinking stopped. Of course, he missed the company of women very much. But Martin's invention had drawn him in so much that he sometimes completely forgot about it. And after nearly a year, the boys went into a stupor. They tried revving their engine back and forth, but they couldn't get what they wanted out of it. Martin, what about him? Well, why don't we just leave it? Why do we have to reinvent the wheel? Max was indignant. Let's make one like everyone else's. Back in 1806, this Frenchman, as it was invented by Francois Isaac de Rivas, reminded Martin. But that's the thing, I don't want to repeat what was or is. And you know why. Because if it worked that well, all cars would have been running on hydrogen long ago. But they don't. So there's something wrong here. Martin, I've already had my say. I'm an honest-to-goodness friend. We've been working on this for almost 2 years, but it's not right. Max, we need to look for like-minded people. A friend came up with an idea. Now, when there is the internet, we could cooperate with someone. Maybe we could find a solution together. What do you suggest? Call out, sighed the friend. I don't know any idiots like us anymore. All right, I'll look into it. Tiredly sat down on the chair guy. Let's take a break for now. I'm tired too, Martin said in a fictitious voice. Finally, 2 weeks later, a friend called Max and told him that he had found something. The young men were sinking their beer. Martin, come on, tell me. Max asked him impatiently. Did you manage to find anyone? Yes, he answered briefly. And I'm still in complete shock. You have no idea who I met on the internet. Who? Curiosity made the guy tan. Did you get to meet a great mind? Yes. Her name is Maria. Looked at him carefully, friend, and she is a real genius. What's the woman's astonishment? All of a sudden you're mocking me? No woman would understand your hydrogen, and this one does, smiled Martin. We're going to Detroit next week. Maria agreed to meet us. Where? Detroit. No, you're out of your mind, his friend said. Where's Salt Lake City and where's Detroit? So what? Are we taking the train? Ignoring his friend's protests, Martin said. So get ready. All right, let's say she's a megabrain. Then why can't she communicate with us on the internet? Looking for flaws. Max, how do you figure that? His friend looked at him in bewilderment. If she has assembled a new hydrogen engine, how will you understand it on the internet? You have to see and feel everything there. I don't know, tried to change Martin's mind. A friend. Well, let her record some video and send it to you. Max, come on, really, stop whining, cut the guy off. Let's just think about where we're gonna stay. I don't think we'll have a problem with that. Unexpectedly answered the friend. My cousin lives there on my mother's side. True, we have not communicated with him for a long time, but I think we can try. We'll rent a hotel in case of emergency. I've already warned my cousins, Martin replied. My father can only give me a little, and as you know, I'm not working anywhere with my invention yet. God, I can't wait to finish the institute. Well, don't worry about the money. I'll talk to my father, Max suggested. I think he won't object to our trip. I'll say that I want to visit my mom's relatives, that they've been asking me for a long time. And then, after the defense of the diploma so in his publishing house, so twisted, that more and will not see them. That's what Max thought. His father gave him money for the trip without any problems. The boy found his cousin's phone number somewhere, and in a few days he and Martin were on the train to Detroit. Hey Max, hugged the guy's cousin with his thick arms. It's been a long time. I never thought I'd see you again. Well, hello, brother. The guest rejoiced. But I'm not alone. I'm with a friend. This is Martin. And I'll tell you honestly, we're here on business. All right, let's go, the guy suggested. We'll talk at home. It's my day off. The cousin was 2 years older than Max. In general, it was a sad story for his family, or rather, for his mother Nicole was from a small village near Detroit. They lived poorly despite the fact that his parents had worked in the collective farm all their lives. They had never been able to get a proper house. And the problem was the woman's mother. For as long as Nicole could remember, her mother had been drinking all her life. Naturally, there was no supervision for the children, and there were 2 of them, the woman and her younger sister. And as they say, the latter followed in her footsteps. When Nicole turned 18, she immediately went to Detroit. Here the girl worked in a store. One day, a handsome young man came in there. It was obvious that he was a commuter. The guy looked at her, and he liked the girl at first sight, so Mark took Nicole to his house. Lucy, her younger sister, married a Muscovite. He was a troublemaker from the beginning. That's how they started drinking together. They had 2 sons. One died as a boy. The child strangled everything with a bag that he put on his head. Naturally, none of the parents were watching him. So, as they say to the meeting, my cousin put a bottle of vodka on the table. We'd like to abstain for now. Martin said no right away. Sorry, we have an important meeting today, so we'd like something lighter. Do you have any tea? Are you kidding me? Tea? The owner laughed. All right, I'll do it myself. He poured himself a cut glass. The guests looked at him in bewilderment. Max began to realize that he had made a big mistake in staying with his cousin. Not only did he seem to be drinking, but his apartment, which he had inherited from his parents, was a mess. It smelled like the place had been lived in by bums who hadn't been cleaned in years. Martin and Max looked at each other. You have a case here, you say. The guy brought the bread to his nose after emptying the glass. Come on, tell me what you've got going on. Anything I can do to help. We're here to see a scientist of yours, Martin said. There's a genius living here? Really? The owner looked at him in surprise. And who does what? She deals with alternative fuels. Max tried to change the subject from drinking. Her name is Maria. Maria is in shock, said the brother. You came here to meet Maria. Do you know her? The cousin guessed. Does that name sound familiar to you? No, answered the boy quickly. It's the first time I've heard of her. I just thought you came to the man's house. But you did. It just so happens that it is a girl who deals with such a complicated topic. Martin smiled. All right, God be with her, with this Maria. The host poured himself another glass. I'll drink and go to bed then. And when will you go to your business? Just lock the door. I have a second key. If I need it, I'll open myself from the inside. Max and his friend were in complete shock. They watched in silence as the guy dried the whole bottle. Without saying a word, he got up from the table and retired to his bed. Brother, I think we'll probably leave right after the meeting. Try to find a reason, Max. So what are you then? Let us not be able to see you. Ah well, have a happy journey, muttered through the pillowmaster and turned away on the other side. What was that? Martin couldn't calm down. I don't have any options. What can this man be called? I also have perfect hair, came out of Max's apartment. God, it's been years since I've seen him, and I really hope it's the last time. We'd better get a hotel. The guys couldn't recover for a long time. They still had 3 hours left before meeting Maria, and they wandered aimlessly around Detroit. You know, of course, I love antiques, but not so much. Looking at an old church, said Martin. Frankly, it's all weighing on me. A friend agreed with me too. It feels like there is nothing to breathe. There seems to be a lot of space and a river, but it's still not Salt Lake City. Finally, the time was up, and the guys went to the cafe that Maria had indicated in her letter. I can't understand why she doesn't call, Max said in bewilderment. No, she has to write. She's got this obsession. How would I know? The friend said. Maybe she's keeping her distance so that everything is official. The young people approached a cafe with the symbolic name Maria's Pastry Shop. A beautiful blonde girl stood at the door. At the sight of Max and Martin, she smiled broadly and approached them. Are you Maria? Martin guessed. Do we look so different from the local guys? He said jokingly. The girl smiled and said nothing. She just waved her hand, and the whole procession went to the table near the window. The girl was holding a strange object. The guys had never seen anything like that before. Maria quickly grabbed what looked like a pen and began to write. I am very happy to meet you, read Martin. It is important to me that you are interested in my work, and I am ready to discuss it with you. I'm sorry, but we'll have to communicate like this because I can't talk. Max slammed down the big lump that came up to his throat. The guy looked at the girl more closely. Maria's blue eyes were just glowing. Maria, don't worry, everything is fine. Martin tried to come to his senses. There's no problem with that. The young people talked for a long time. It was mainly Martin who delved into the subtleties. Max kept looking at Maria. God, how is this possible? He thought, such an amazing girl. She's a real genius. But a mute shiver ran down his spine. She can't speak, and it doesn't seem to bother her at all. That's the kind of willpower I wish I had. I've always envied Lage for his stamina. But Maria, it's incredible. The girl as if read his thoughts and looked at him with interest. After a few seconds, she, embarrassed, and lowered her eyes. After they drank tea and completely sorted out Maria's ideas, she invited them to her place to watch the device. "Maria, this is something amazing." Martin was in shock. It turns out that according to your idea, such an engine will squeeze out not 120 kilometers per 1 kilogram of hydrogen, but 150. That's just unbelievable. The young people went into an old room, which the girl rented as a laboratory. She showed them all the blueprints, and finally they started the engine. "It works," Martin shouted in excitement. "Maria, you are just a clever girl. Hydrogen from garbage and your engine is the new future." Max's hair seemed to stand on end. Everything he saw seemed impossible to him. The guy couldn't even speak in amazement. Finally, the girl turned off the engine, and they sat down at the table to discuss it all. "Maria, what about the patent?" Martin asked the girl. They agreed to patent it. The girl grabbed a tablet and wrote something quickly, took her hand away, and let the guest read it. "It's still a problem. They don't want it." The guy read it. "Who'd doubt it? Then their whole gas and oil industry will go to hell. But that's okay, we'll work together on this volume thing. The main thing is that it works, and even with such savings." The guys exchanged phone numbers and agreed that Maria would come to them in Salt Lake City as soon as she could. The guys said goodbye. I should have said overwhelmed with emotion. No one had any strength left. Maria said goodbye to the guests and joyfully returned to her laboratory. The young people brought her such inspiration that one thought after another came to the girl. She sat down at her tablet and began to write everything down. In a few minutes, Maria was carried into her world, which belonged only to her. For many years now, she had finally met like-minded people. And now her invention could have a new life. That same evening, Max and Martin took the train home. Their minds were so excited by what they had seen that they were both eager to get down to business. What if we could put the whole machine together? It was to hydrogen that Martin's thoughts drifted into the future. That would be a real sensation. But at least we could build the engine, sighed his friend. And you're already going for a whole car. Maria is an incredible girl, Martin continued. You have to have such talent. Honestly, I had some gender prejudices before I met her. But like that, women have less brains than men. But Maria proved me wrong. How do you cook in a machine like that? Look at her. She's got physics, chemistry, math. She clicks the tower like nuts. Yes, Max said dreamily. I like Maria very much. She's a dream girl. And it doesn't matter that she can't tell her. Pushed Martin with a friend's elbow. Don't get all romantic on me. Maria is our friend, not a date girl. Don't you like her as a girl? Max looked at his friend without understanding. She is just beautiful. Did you see her eyes? They are so blue, just like the sky. I would not refuse a girl like her, but I have a purely pragmatic interest in her, he sighed. I want us to join forces and create a damn car that will not only run on hydrogen, but that will be the most economical. Back home, the boys began their experiments with renewed vigor. Now they needed to get as much hydrogen as possible, so that then part of it could be transported somehow to Maria. Martin dreamed that after Maria had patented his engine, he would be able to get her official permission to use it in his car. The girl didn't mind. Max, on the other hand, dreamed of something else. The girl immediately fell into his soul. Maria did not interest him as a scientist, although he admired her. He liked her as a person. There seemed to be something more behind her silence. For the first time in his life, the guy could look at a girl not as an object of lust or a thing, but as a person with whom he wanted to spend his time, to be friends, to discuss pressing problems. The day after Martin Max arrived, they were fully immersed in work. It was March, and the guys didn't need to go to the institute. Max had already written his diploma long ago. Martin sometimes typed something on the computer at night. Martin, let me give you some money. Let them do the practical part. A friend suggested it. But when you get your diploma, you don't have to write. I'll pick up some hardware myself. Boy, after all, I have to finish it. And why didn't I get into engineering? He resented me. After the guests, Maria just plowed. The girl had already written several scientific articles, constantly wrote about her work on the internet, But except for laughter and insults, no one offered anything concrete. And then these two people appeared in her life. Her mom was talking to her mother. "You know, I feel like they're gonna help me. Together we can get this whole thing started." "Maria, how much effort you put into all this?" Her mother answered her. "It's unbelievable." And it was true. After the girl stopped speaking after a severe fright, her parents immediately moved to the other side of the city, where Maria began to go to a specialized school for mute children. All her teachers were just shocked by her. After the tragic incident, the girl's mind began to work even faster. On the one hand, Jean's Maria's father was a chemist, and everything in their house was littered with rare manuals on all areas of the science. But Greg was not accepted in his time. All ideas were rejected, and he eventually began to drink. Maria, from the 5th grade, seriously began to be interested in chemistry. The girl hoped that this way she could return her father. Yes, Leonid Grigorievich read her complex theories, explained to his daughter how the universe is organized. But after she went to bed, the man put a bottle on the table. Maria's mother couldn't do anything about it. Even constant first places in the chemistry Olympiad for special children couldn't change anything. And one day Greg simply didn't wake up. For Maria, it was the strongest blow. And if not for her father's books, in which she then immersed, the girl simply went mad. Nena, Maria's mother, was very happy for her daughter. She realized that the brilliant mind of her daughter should be noticed by someone. But most of all, she wanted Maria to marry one day, have children, and find her happiness as a woman. But who would marry her? Her mother thought, if someone as dumb as she was. And where will you find a guy who loves science as much as Maria? Mostly they're all insecure, cornered. They just want to live their lives without anyone touching them. Despite the fact that Maria was on it, it was a huge problem. But thanks to her, the girl could get some money from the state. She did not need to work for this. The girl realized that if she wanted to realize her dream, she needed to fully focus on her work. That is why she could not work fully. Sometimes Maria was given an order to do some control or tests. She even tried her hand at artificial stones, which the girl grew for jewelers. After Maria graduated from the special school, she was faced with a very difficult choice. Undoubtedly, the girl had talent, and she needed to continue studying. But no university went her way. "How are we going to get her?" said the chancellor of Detroit's university in dismay. "How will she go to class?" Nina ran to all kinds of authorities, but everywhere she was rejected. Maria could not study in a regular university. The girl cried bitterly for several months, but then she pulled herself together and decided to act on her own. Maria did not want to be a theoretical scientist. She realized that in order to get somewhere, you need a practical part. The girl decided to deal with future technologies. She chose alternative fuel for her project. Maria knew for a long time that hydrogen was the most common element, and despite the complexity of the work, it was possible to produce it. Maria became interested in isotopes of hydrogen, air, and after almost 3 years, she was able to isolate pure hydrogen from it. Maria spent almost all day now in her laboratory. She wanted to prepare for her trip to Salt Lake City. The girl wanted to make some improvements to her engine. It was almost 8 o'clock when Maria realized that she was very tired. She put down all her drawings, closed her workbook. Only now she remembered that she hadn't eaten anything all day. She thought, "I have to get home quickly, or I'll starve to death. Besides, my mom already texted me that she was worried." Maria closed the door to her lab and walked towards the bus stop. The girl rented a very cheap room in the place where warehouses used to be, but the place was deserted. Maria walked forward quickly as she suddenly felt someone swooping down on her from behind and clamped her nose with something. A few seconds later, the girl lost consciousness. How heavy! A man's quiet voice was heard in the darkness. He was trying to pull a bag over Maria. At last he succeeded, and he put the girl in the car and drove her to an unknown destination. Maria didn't come to her senses the whole time. "This is where you belong." The same voice was heard, and the man began to pull the girl's body out of the car in which he had brought her. After a few minutes, some kind of door opened and Maria was carried into the room as a bundle. The man put her on a stretcher and took her somewhere. After a few minutes, he pulled into some cold room, pulled off Maria's sack, and threw the girl on the floor. "This is where you belong," he laughed. He went out and locked the door behind him. After about 20 minutes, Maria came to her senses. She could already feel the cold. The girl jumped up quickly. She had had a fear of the dark for years. In an instant, she found herself in a biology class in the back room where her classmates had locked her up for the night. Then from fear, the girl lost consciousness and lay on the floor until morning, until she was not found there. Her mother and the police searched for her all night, but the girl was nowhere to be found. They even came to the school and checked all the elementary school classrooms, but they did not go to the third floor at that time. After Maria was brought to consciousness, the girl realized that she could not speak. She tried to make some sounds, but nothing worked. The doctor said that Maria would never speak again because of the severe stress. This came as a real shock to everyone. Maria began to panic. She felt her lungs start to work frantically, but she still couldn't breathe. A strange odor hit her nostrils. The girl tried to breathe somehow. She remembered her phone and reached into her pocket. She pressed the buttons, but the phone seemed to hang. The screen kept showing someone else's number. Maria was in such a state that she couldn't recognize it. The girl began to write something with trembling fingers. "Help me, please." She duplicated it in her mind. "I'm locked up somewhere. It's dark in here." Finally, the girl felt as if she had been electrocuted, and she directed the light of the screen to the room she was in. There were corpses lying on tables. In the morgue automatically wrote the girl and had a phone with horror. She began to gasp. It seemed to her that she had already died. The fear was so strong that she could not cope with it. The girl closed her eyes, but after a moment, strange thoughts began to appear in her head. Was there really nothing that could be done? One by one, the thoughts appeared in her head. "Yes, I'm trapped. No one can help me now. But if I can't do something from the outside, then I can do something from the inside." After that thought, it was as if the girl had some strength. She suddenly jumped to her feet and started screaming, but she couldn't do anything. Maria opened her mouth wide, but she couldn't utter a sound. Could I suddenly hit her on the head like a hammer? No. The girl heard someone's inhuman voice. "No. Let me out of here, help." A loud scream echoed throughout her brain. Maria screamed for so long until her voice went ah. After she threw away her fear, she felt better. The girl felt herself start to breathe more freely, her lungs and easily conducting air. "No," the girl said aloud. "God, who locked me in the morgue." Loudly she spoke. I began to speak again. Through tears, whispered the girl. "But how can I get out of here now?" Maria looked around once more. She was uneasy, but there was no longer such wild fear and terror. She was more confused by the terrible odor and the cold. "God, I'll either freeze or die here by morning." The girl was afraid. "When will I sing?" Suddenly, she decided so unexpectedly. And Maria began to sing. She tried to remember all the songs she knew. The powerful voice made her feel warmer, and the terrible odor stopped irritating her nostrils so much. It had been probably an hour when the girl took a break, and only now Maria noticed that her phone had been dead for a long time. In her bag, she didn't notice it anywhere. Maybe it's thieves. The girl thought to herself, "They stole my bag and then brought it here to get rid of me." But whatever it was, her phone not only hung up, but stopped working. As it always does in these complicated cases. But then, I'll sing until morning. The girl decided. So I will definitely not freeze. I imagine the state of the pathologist who enters the morgue and hears singing here. The girl laughed. He would go crazy. Maria, as if looking at herself from the outside, and could not believe that she not only survived, did not go crazy, but also retained a sense of humor. "What's happening to me?" She said out loud, "I'm trapped in a morgue among all these corpses. Of course I feel some fear, but it doesn't make me sick. I'm at peace inside. And most importantly," I started to say again what it all means. The girl was tired of standing on her feet. She tried to sit down near the wall. Maria felt that she would even fall asleep. She began to feel strongly inclined to sleep. but the girl was afraid that by morning she would be cold. The whole story makes me laugh. She laughed. Who would have thought it? For years, doctors have been fighting over my disease. I've had so many procedures, and now I've been cured by a corpse. She couldn't calm down. Not even animals, not plants, just ordinary dead people. It's true that fear is a great fear. If someone told me about this, I'd die at the thought. That I'm not only sane or conscious, but I'm not bad. If it weren't for this cold. Maria's eyes became quite accustomed to the darkness, and she began to distinguish the bodies lying on the couch. The girl took a few steps around the room for the first time and walked around. It seemed to her that there was a warmer place near the door, and she moved there. At first, Maria pounded on the door with her fists, but then she realized that either no one could hear her, or there was no one in the morgue. The girl squatted down. She felt some coolness, but the penetrating cold, as in the beginning, the room was not here, and the corpses were lying away from her. They were all concentrated in the coldest place. Why did they do this to me? Maria began to come to her senses. Is it some kind of accident, or is it all set up? She pondered. But you don't just do things like that. So someone organized it all. But what were their motives? Maybe they want to kill me because of my invention. There have been so many accidents with famous scientists and inventors. Maybe some oil oligarchs organized it. Then why did they drag me to the morgue? No, it doesn't make sense. Then who am I interfering with? The girl couldn't understand. Maria had forgotten all about her cell phone, that she texted someone. The girl thought about being stuck in the morgue until morning. She didn't know what time it was either. I'm tired of singing, Maria said out loud. How can I pass the time? Maybe they'll bring someone in at night and I'll be discovered. And yet the girl could no longer bear the horrible odor. She stepped a little to the side and vomited. Maria felt dizzy. With all her might, she pressed herself against the door crack to try and catch some fresher air. I can do this, pounded in her head. I can take it all, whispered the pale lips. Hello, Maria. Hello, shouted Max into the receiver. But there was no answer. At first, there was complete silence, but then the distinctive sound of a blocked number was heard. God, what does all this mean? In horror, thought the guy. It could hardly be a joke. Since Maria can't speak, this text message may be the only hope of rescue for her. The young man quickly dialed his friend's number, but Martin was in the laboratory, engaged in his experiments, so he even forgot to take his phone out of his coat pocket. Called him 5 times already. What am I supposed to do now? Clutching his head, Max reasoned. I'll definitely call Detroit's police. The guy called the police and asked for someone to contact Detroit. Young man, are you kidding me? The voice on the phone said, I'm not laughing. What Detroit? What morgue? I'll make an administrative case against you now. The policeman swore and hung up. You understand, Maria can't speak. She's mute, the guy continued. But at last he got the dings and beeps, and he took his phone away from his ear. I have to do this, he said to himself and looked at his watch. I can make it in 12 hours if I go at full speed. Max quickly ran downstairs where his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen. The boy approached them with a worried look. I need to go to Detroit right away. I've got a friend in trouble. Probably, if I don't save him, he just won't survive. The son said quickly. As soon as I get there, I'll call you. And he ran out of the house. Max ran out after him. Father, what happened? He tried to stop the car, but the guy had already pulled out of the gates of the big house and sped down the deserted streets toward the highway. Just so long as she could hold out. Knocked in the temples of the guy Maria native and hold on, as if he tried to convey to the girl his thoughts. I will definitely save you. Max did not fully understand why this whole story had such a strong effect on him, but he felt very clearly inside that Maria meant much more to him than he thought. The boy was realizing some feelings that were new to him. He kept feeling that he had known Maria for a long time, but it was as if he had forgotten her. And now that she was in trouble, he remembered that. Maria, do I need you? Any thoughts in his head? God, what's happening to me? The boy said out loud, I don't understand anything, but I know one thing. I have to save Maria. Max drove in a straight line at full speed. The guy realized he could get a ticket. But he didn't care at the time. It was still in full bloom when Max's car pulled into Detroit. The guy didn't know where he should go now. He dialed 03 and called. "Can you tell me where the morgue is in Detroit?" he asked quickly. "I have a friend locked up there." There was silence. The other end didn't know how to respond to the question. "Are you trying to play a trick on me?" The woman finally answered. "I'll call the police now. I'll be very grateful to you for that," Max said tiredly. "They refused to accept my call. Will you help me save a man? Or are you going to blame me?" "We have several of them," I heard a disgruntled reply. "How do I know which one you want?" "The most unremarkable one." It was as if someone had asked through the boy. "The one where a person can be easily hidden." "Well, I guess a regional hospital wouldn't suit you," she reasoned. "Bureau of Forensic Medicine, most likely also a center of ritual services. They usually have everything under control. Except Detroit General Hospital. I don't have any other obvious options." "How do you get there?" the stranger asked hopefully. "I just pulled into town where the big sign is. They have a morgue under the 7th building." The paramedic answered and gave Max detailed information so that he could get there. It was already light when the guy ran up to the door of the morgue. He looked at his watch. It was 8:30. He started knocking with all his might, but no one answered him. So he rushed into the emergency room and got everyone on their feet. "You're talking nonsense." The doctor on duty got angry. "Are you out of your mind? How could anyone be locked up?" And yet Max got his way. And in about 15 minutes, he opened the doors of the morgue together with the guard and the doctor. The guy entered the corridor and shouted, "Maria, you're here." The whole morgue was filled with an inhuman voice. "Maria, you'll lift all the dead." The doctor laughed hysterically. "I almost blew my hat off from your scream." But after a moment, there was a soft bang, as if something had fallen. Everyone went to the refrigerator. From there, the banging started. A minute later, the room was opened. From the doorway, a girl staggered out. "Maria," muttered her Max. "It's okay." He took her in his arms and carried her to his machine. "What a mess," the guard whispered. "What's going to happen now?" "Probably be put on trial." The doctor and the guard silently watched Max until he disappeared behind the hospital gates. "Maria, don't be afraid. Everything will be all right now," Max said. He quickly took something out of the glove compartment. "Write your address." He handed the girl a pen and some paper. "I'll take you home now, and then we'll decide together what to do." Maria worked something with trembling hands. The girl finally began to come to her senses and cried loudly. Her nerves relaxed a little and the stress started to come out. "It's all right, sweetheart," Max urged. "It's all right." He tried to calm the girl down. Maria abruptly grabbed a paper and wrote something. Max read that the girl asked to call her mother. "Hello, Nina." Quickly the guy realized. Maria is already fine. She is safe and sound. "My name is Max. I went to see her the other day with a friend about the engine from Salt Lake Satoya. Maria texted me to help her out. We'll be there soon." "Yeah, she's fine. I'll tell you all about it on the spot." Max tried to speak calmly, hearing the woman's hysterics. In a minute, they drove up to a high-rise building. There was a woman walking back and forth in front of the entrance. Maria, sobbing, ran up to the girl. "Maria, my girl, what happened to you?" "Nina, we can talk about everything at home," asked Max. "Maria has no strength. She better lie down for a while." The mother prepared for her daughter herbal tea with lemon. And the girl went to her bed. While she came to herself a little, Max told Nina Alexeyevna everything that had happened to him and who it could be. The woman looked at the guy in horror. "Max, I don't understand anything." "I don't either yet," sighed the guy. "Now Maria will come to her senses, and then we will write everything she knows." Max felt so tired that he just fell off his feet. He had forgotten all about his parents. Suddenly his phone rang. "Yes, I'm fine. I saved Maria. Someone locked her in the morgue." The son answered tiredly. "Let me call you later." "Maria who?" Shocked, questioned Mark Austin. "She was locked up in the morgue." "I don't understand anything." "Dad, please, I'll call you later." "I don't even have the energy to talk to you," begged his son Max. Maria fell asleep. The landlady came to him, "Come and you, and lay down on my bed. And then when you both wake up, we'll figure it out." The boy couldn't even resist. He just fell on the bed and fell asleep immediately. Nina settled down on the old couch. They all had hardly slept all that night, so they were completely powerless. It was probably around 2 o'clock when Max felt someone touch his hair. The guy immediately opened his eyes. Maria was sitting in front of him. "Maria, are you all right?" The guy jumped up. "Are you feeling better?" The girl smiled and nodded at him. Despite the fact that Maria had her voice back, she didn't want to tell anyone about it yet. And it wasn't that she didn't trust her mother or Max. The girl just wanted to deal with who wanted to kill her first and why, and in such a sophisticated way. Nina quickly set the table and they had lunch. After that, Maria took a piece of paper and started to write something on it. The girl described everything that had happened to her. "So you didn't see him?" Max asked. "Maybe even a glimpse of him." Maria shook her head negatively. She took a pen and wrote that she thought it was a man. "Maybe two. Judging by the fact that they brought her to the morgue, the bandits must have carried her in their arms. So let's start at the beginning," the guy suggested. "You were walking home. Somebody came up behind you and put something on your nose. A minute later, you passed out. What could it be? It's probably either." Maria wrote, "It's often used to temporarily incapacitate a person." "Okay, you were sedated with ether, and then somehow you ended up in the morgue." Max continued to speculate. "You wanted to make a phone call, but something happened to your phone. You only pressed one number on mine. You texted me for help. Then your phone died. No one came to see you, and you didn't see or hear from anyone. That's it." The girl nodded her head in agreement. Max and Nina looked at her in bewilderment. "Maria, who could it be?" Her mother asked. "Do you have any idea?" "None." She wrote on a piece of paper, "I don't know who it is or what Max stood up for. I think until we find out who did it and for what purpose. You better get out of here, get out of Detroit." Nina asked him. "Max, but where?" "I don't have any relatives around here. We'll all go to Salt Lake City together," the guy suggested. "I'll help you rent an apartment for a while, and then we'll see." "Nina, do you realize this is serious?" He looked at the woman who was trying to tell him something. Thank God Maria survived this time. But we can't take any more risks. The girl's mother was very afraid for her daughter's life, so she finally agreed. She and Maria packed all the necessary things, called her work, and explained that she urgently needed to leave for a few weeks. Then, everyone drove to Max's lab. Max carefully loaded the girl's invention and all the necessary documents. A statement to the police. "We'll write it here," Max suggested. "It's not safe to do such things here." Everyone got into the car and drove to Salt Lake City. On the way, Max took a break. Near a small town, a woman and a girl went to get water, and Max called his father. "Dad, I need an apartment right away. I'm asking you," he said seriously. "I'm taking Maria and her mom home." "Max, what the hell is going on?" The father shouted unhappily. "What's with Maria, such a girlfriend of mine?" Unexpectedly, the boy replied, "I love her very much." "You have a fiancé?" Mark Austin asked in astonishment. But for some reason he didn't tell me and my mother anything. "Dad, come on, please help me later. Cut the kid off. Give me money for an apartment for a couple months. I'm not bringing them home with me." "All right," the man agreed. "But only after you tell me everything." Max drove home slowly, making stops along the way. So they arrived in Salt Lake City early the next morning. Mark Austin sent his son an address that they could all go to together, but it would do for the first time. Took a look around the boys' one-bedroom apartment. "Looks like it's got everything, so what do you got?" "I'll check in with you this afternoon. We'll have to go to the police and file a report." Maria approached Max, and from her eyes he realized that the girl wanted to thank him. "Maria, the main thing is that you're alive, and the rest can be fixed." He looked into her glowing eyes. Max went home happy. For the first time in his life, he felt that he had done a very important thing. Max didn't feel like a hero, but he clearly realized that he was in the right place at the right time, and that made him happy. Suddenly, Max's phone rang, and Martin's phone number popped up. Would you have called me in another week? His friend said grudgingly. I almost died here, and you don't even want to know anything about me. Max, I'm sorry. I forgot my phone in the garage yesterday, Martin said guiltily. Anyway, it fell out and sat down somewhere, so I couldn't find it for a long time. What happened? Finally, he asked not me, but Maria. Quickly answered the guy. I rescued her. She's in Salt Lake City now, by the way. I brought her and her mother back from Detroit. Yes, I must have missed something important, Martin replied in shock. From now on, please elaborate. To say that the friend was completely bewildered by Max's story is to say nothing. Martin couldn't believe a word he said at first, but then he came to his senses and realized that Max had no desire to lie to him. What will happen now? Martin asked. Do you think she'll be hunted? Maybe someone wants to steal it. How should I know? Replied the friend tiredly. What normal person would think of such a thing? If they wanted to get rid of her or steal something, they probably would have done it already. But maybe it's a trick to get rid of her? The boy suggested. You know, not everyone can die from being in the morgue, Max replied. It's possible to go crazy, I guess. I don't understand his purpose at all, what he wanted to do. Well, let's say the idea was to make Maria go crazy, Martin reasoned. Then it turns out that all her designs are bullshit too. Or rather, life-threatening. But if you look at it that way, sighed the friend. Then yes, I guess, maybe. Then it turns out that Maria's invention is actually so important that in this way it can be discredited. But it seems to me that it would be easier to burn down her laboratory or kill her. God knows what they have in mind. With annoyance in his voice, replied the guy. Well, the main thing is that Maria is alive, and the rest time will tell. It was not far from Max's house, so he finished talking to his friend, promising to meet him tonight. En epa. Hi. A guy ran into the house. I'm finally home. Dad, thanks for helping me with the apartment. But now then we can talk to you, looked at his son Mark Austin unhappily. Yes, now I'm ready, replied the boy and sat down on the chair. Ask me questions. I'll answer all your questions. Don't you want to tell us anything yourself? His mother looked at him in surprise. I thought you would want to tell us your secret love story. It's not secret at all, Max said. It's just that when we went to Detroit, I met the girl of my dreams. I mean, almost 2 weeks ago, you just met her. And today you've already brought her and her mother to Salt Lake City. Max's father said in anger, Are you out of your mind? Dad, what's wrong with you? I love Maria. The boy crossed his arms on his chest. Have I ever said that about any girl before? No, Mark Austin was honest. But how can you get to know a person in 2 weeks? Would you look at yourself first? The guy threw a grudge. How long did you know your mom when you took her to Salt Lake City? But that's a different story, the man said. And times were different then too. But why not? I'll even remind you, exactly 3 days, the son persisted. And what, you don't live well with your mom? No. Again, Max's dad had to admit it. We're talking about you now, not us. And what, in fact, what is the difference? The boy wouldn't give up. I love Maria, and she will be my wife. But you don't know her at all. Nickel intervened. You could at least ask us first, Mom, am I going to live with her? Not you. Coldly looked at the woman's son. So what do you care? But the problem is at least what you're going to feed her. Are you sitting on my neck yourself? Mark Austin threw down the ultimate trump card. And now you want me to feed your Maria? No, you don't have to feed Maria. She's a genius. Maria is a scientist, and she has inventions that will change all our lives, replied Max. Max, you amaze me. My father couldn't find the right words. So you mean to say that your girlfriend is doing science while you stand in nightclubs and spend your father's money? Are you serious? The guy said calmly. And for your information, I've been doing the same thing for a long time. The son couldn't take it anymore. We make hydrogen from waste plastic in the lab. You collect trash. Max's father couldn't believe what he was saying. I'm sorry, but I sure as hell can't believe it. How do you want it? Indifferently, the boy replied. Maria has invented a very economical hydrogen engine, and Martin and I want to build the world's first car based on it. Nickel, what kind of nonsense is our son talking? Mark Austin couldn't take it anymore. I can't listen to any more of this nonsense. Okay, Maria, in this I can still believe, but in the genius of our son. Alas, Max, you didn't write a single physics or chemistry test in high school. So what? But I know what hydrogen is and how it can be obtained by decomposing organic matter. I hope I don't have to explain to you that the polyethylene that's lying under our feet is an organic substance. The son said arrogantly. That's enough. The man grabbed his head. I've had enough of your hydrogen. I hope so. Do you remember that you gave your word that you would work for me after your diploma? So I'm looking forward to seeing you. I remember. Max replied grudgingly. You don't even let me forget about it. That's fine. Mark Austin rubbed his hands together. On this positive note, I propose to end our conversation. I will think about your Maria, he added and left the hall. Mania, at least tell him. I beg you. Looked at the woman's son. Maria is a very nice girl. Max, I asked you to finish the institute first, and then do what you want. His mother didn't listen to him. That's what the boy always thought. It's always profitable to be bad. But when you do noble deeds, they make you look like a real fool. What? They'd rather I drink and hang out in nightclubs. They don't know what they want from me. The guy was not happy. He went to his room. He wanted to get some sleep. After lunch, he was going to pick up Maria and go with her to Martin's garage. Besides, he had to take the instruments there. The girl wanted to continue her work, and Max didn't want to leave her alone for too long. I'm going to marry Maria anyway, he thought before. Falling asleep. It's all right, I can work on my own. And I don't need your money. Soon we'll have our own car and I'll have my own money. Maria. So Alex jumped out of bed when his guests left. It's been a long time since I've seen her. Nothing. I'll fix that, the guy whispered under his nose, closing the front door on the key. He quickly ran downstairs, and since he had an advantage over his guests, he could follow them quietly. What are you climbing up to here? The cousin was indignant, watching his cousin and his friend. I've been here with you for almost 3 hours. Finally, the boys turned the other way and went somewhere. After half an hour, they headed towards a cafe. They were met by a beautiful girl. Here is Maria, lost from Joy hands Alex. But hello, very glad to see you again. After Maria came to herself, the girl began to be questioned by teachers and a psychologist about who locked her in the back room with the skeleton. The schoolgirl immediately pointed at Alex and William. The latter stood silently, lowered his head, and the former used anything to avoid admitting anything. What's it got to do with me? You ask William. Seriously answered the boy. It was like this. Maria comes up to us and says rumor has it that I'm the cowardliest in the class. But I'm not. Would you like me to prove it to you? I could spend all night with a skeleton. Will and I started to talk her into letting Maria go home. We took our backpacks and left. We never saw her again that day. Then why were both doors to both the back room and the classroom locked? The principal looked at him sternly. How do I know? Alex was indignant. Did you find the keys from me? You can ask your mother or father that we don't have them at home and never had them. After talking to his parents, the principal decided to remove Alex from the school. Drunken parents tried to wave their hands in protest, but the head of the school did not change his decision. Then Lyudmila decided to send her son to his mother. She, of course, was ungodly drunk, but the girl realized that she had nowhere to send her son. Alex's grandmother by that time already lived alone. A year ago, she had buried her husband. Nikolay had been struggling with her drunkenness for many years, and as they say, had worn himself out. He tried to breathe once, but couldn't. His heart stopped. The doctors said that a blood clot had broken off. His grandmother in the village did not watch Sashka in any way, so the boy began to suppress the last signs of empathy in himself by all means. At first, he shot birds with a slingshot. His favorite occupation was in the evening deadfall, sparrow counting. As Alex grew up, so did his amusements dying cats and dogs caught by the boy in traps, hanging by the throat on trees' neighbors' ducks, overflights and gasoline, and burned chickens and cats is a small part of the favorite activities of the boy, from which he enjoyed. But from time to time, he still remembered that because of some Maria, he had been deprived of normal living conditions. Of course, it was hard in Detroit, but at least there was food at home. In the village, my grandmother drank all the time. She didn't grow or cook anything. Alex quickly learned to steal money, but the neighbors began to suspect and complain about him. So the boy began to blame only one person for all his failures. Maria. In his fantasies, he always imagined her writhing in pain, screaming, crying, and calling for help. When Alex was bad, he always imagined it. Such pictures immediately lifted his mood. Time passed, and the boy Alex turned into a guy. He hardly finished 9 grades and lived his own life for a long time. Sometimes his mother came to the village. When Alex turned 17, his grandmother died. His mother did not want to take him to the city, even though he asked, no matter how much of a brute he was. But Alex realized that he could not survive without a job. Naturally, any education was out of the question. With age, Alex's hatred for Maria grew into hatred for his grandmother, mother, and all women. He simply despised them all. The boy dried his first glass of vodka when he was 11 years old. Then he lay unconscious in the barn for almost 24 hours after his grandmother died. He began to slowly adopt the family traditions. The kid sold everything he could get his hands on. He didn't work anywhere. Sometimes he was hired in the villages for some physical labor, when he had to carry something or dig. He didn't really want to learn anything. Neighbors tried to avoid him, despite the fact that Alex grew up and did not mock animals so much. He still showed his animal grin from time to time. Local people were afraid of him, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they learned that he was going to sell his grandmother's house and go to the city. When the boy was 22, a district officer came to him and told him that his mother and father had died. They participated in a joint drinking party in private sectors, and by morning they had all burned to death. Alex dreamed of selling his house for more money, but no one wanted to take it even for a penny. The house was old, it was a mess, and it had a reputation for being a mess. Finally, someone bought the house for very little money. It was just enough for a few months in town. And then there was the question of work. Alex worked as a loader, tried himself at the factory, but he did not want to work hard. One day, the guy saw an ad in the newspaper there in the morgue required an orderly. That would be interesting, laughed the guy. That's the kind of thing I like. He rubbed his hands together happily. So Alex began to work in the morgue. The doctor did not bother him much. And the work is not to say that it was difficult, no harder than pulling sacks. The guy thought after he started working there. Finally, Max and his friend left the cafe. Maria followed them. Alex continued to follow all 3 of them. So Maria has made it to the top, he whispered angrily. I've suffered all my life because of her, and she doesn't know any problems. That's okay, I'll get you back to your seat in no time. The plan flashed in Alex's head. As soon as Alex found out where Maria's lad was, his business was done and he was gone. From that day forward, the boy was working out his plan for revenge. I'll see what a genius you are. Alex laughed hysterically. Pour yourself more and more glasses. We'll see how you'll sing. If the skeleton made you speechless, I can't imagine what will happen to you. His laughter echoed through the apartment from the corpses. For almost a week, Alex had been imagining in his mind how Maria would be tortured in the morgue. He especially liked the ending. Maria, from fear with her hands, tries to tear her veins and leaves bloody marks on the wall. Then she senselessly falls to the floor and dies. 10 days later, Alex had everything ready. He waited outside the loud car all day. 3 months ago, he managed to buy an old car, which he now used to get to work. Putting Maria to sleep was no problem for him. The pathologist he worked with had told him everything in detail. After Alex had locked Maria in the morgue's refrigerator, he had discovered her bag in the back seat. Oh shit, cussed the guy. What am I going to do with it? Better throw it away so as not to attract attention. On the way home, he pelted the bag with rocks and threw it into the river. He made sure it didn't float up and, satisfied, drove home. All night, Alex could not sleep from the transportation of judgment. He felt so good. Pictures of Maria's suffering kept popping up in his head. A bottle of vodka helped him with that, and Alex's imagination went downhill with terrible force. Alex had 2 days so he could savor his victory. He had the weekend off. The next day, the guy kept waiting for a call to let him know what had happened at the morgue. But the phone was silent. Alex went to work. It's quiet again. Andrew, how's it going without me? Did everything go okay? With curiosity, he asked the pathologist. Yes, Alex, everything is fine. As always, calmly replied the doctor. To my great joy, there was no one at the weekend, so I was also resting on Sunday. The doctor and the guard who helped Max open the morgue agreed not to tell anyone about the incident. If there will be police to look for, then you and I will tell, suggested the doctor on duty. And if he took the girl and that's it. Why should we get involved in all this? Alex's brain was exploding. He checked the refrigerator several times. He found nothing suspicious there. The orderly was not himself that day. Alex, are you sick? The doctor asked him. Are you not feeling well? You are all white as a wall. I did not understand the question. Alex, no, yes, tried to return him to reality. But then go home, suggested Andrew. It's okay, I'll manage without you. Alex returned home. He felt very dizzy. He lay down and tried to figure out what had happened. Maybe someone let her out, he thought. Then why haven't they said anything about it yet? It's a hell of a thing. But if the paper had died a long time ago, there'd be police at the morgue. It was as if she vanished. His head exploded. Maybe she's a witch? An unclean force? Her corpses helped her escape. Everything was becoming delusional. His thoughts were becoming delusional. The guy tried to come back to reality, but something was pulling him back again. He felt his temperature rising. The delirium started. He was thrashing around in his bed, all the time yelling something, Maria, where did you call? Did he call for someone? I didn't kill her. Help, help, skeleton. Don't touch me, Mom. The corpses sounded through the apartment, unconnected to his words. It had been 2 weeks since Maria had filed a police report, but the case had turned out to be so convoluted that no one could still tell her anything. The girl lived in a rented apartment with her mother and worked in Martin's garage. Max was there all day long, too. Max got a call from his father one day. I can't talk to you for days. Where are you? I'm in the lab, he answered quickly. I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now. We have an experiment to finish. All right, Mark Austin got angry. Where is the location of your damn lab, Max Moo? Quickly answered and hung up. He sat as a secretary and had to write down all the statements. An hour later, someone knocked on the garage door. Dad was puzzled and said, Son, what are you doing here? Sorry, but this is a work environment. I just came to see what my son was doing. The man said loudly. Mark Austin, come in, Martin greeted the guest. This is Maria, so to speak, our brain. And Max and I are just insects compared to her. But hello, Maria. The man approached the girl. I finally met you. Maria smiled and said nothing. The girl looked at Max's father with happy eyes. And Maria can't speak, whispered his son in his ear. She is mute against the background of childhood trauma. Ah, that's what it is. Mark Austin sighed. It's all clear to me now, but I won't disturb you. He turned and headed for the exit. This is just what we need. The man resented him all the way. Not only did he not know where he had brought her from, but she couldn't talk. In the evening, Mark Austin called everyone to the council. He was serious about discussing his fiancée with Max. Can't speak Nicole opened her mouth in surprise. Maria mute. So what? Objected the son. Does it matter that she can't speak? How are you going to communicate with her? The father didn't give up, and how are we going to talk to her? Well, I am communicating with her now, and very well. Max didn't give up his position, but it was too much. Mother protested. I'm asking you to come to your senses. All right, the son got up from his chair. If you don't like Maria, then I won't live with you. He defiantly began to gather his things. Max, are you serious? Nicole said in shock. And where will you live then? Well, with Maria and her mom? Dryly answered the guy. And when we collect the car, we will have our own money. Maria and I will live on it. That's how the father got up, and he thought about how we will look in people's eyes. I'm a respected man in town. You're causing me so much trouble with your Maria. Well, if it makes you feel better, you can disown me. I'll take it, and I don't need your publishing house. That's enough. The father shouted at the top of his lungs. You're not going anywhere. But after the wedding, live with your Maria wherever you want. Nina had long ago realized that something was going on between her daughter and Max. She liked the guy, and it was obvious how he looked after Maria. Almost 2 months passed and Max couldn't take it anymore. He talked to Maria. The girl, very much embarrassed, took a pen and a piece of paper and wrote something on it. Yes, Max read, and with all his might he lifted his beloved in his arms. Maria, I love you so much. Martin was very happy for his friend. He realized that with a calm Maria, Max would learn to control his emotions and would achieve great success in life. Son, but maybe you should have defended your diploma first. Nicole begged her son. But your Maria is not going anywhere. You've only known her for a few months. Mom sternly looked at her son. At the end of May, Maria and I will be married. I will not change my decision. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Maria and her mother went home. The police called them, but the girl asked her mother not to say anything for the time being. We found the man who locked your daughter in the morgue, the policeman said over the phone. Maria looked at her mother in horror. On the one hand, the girl very much wanted to know why they had done this to her. On the other, she had fear, perhaps due to Max or her inner strength. But the girl quickly forgot about the incident at the morgue as she left Detroit. After the police station, Maria and Nina were driving home in shock. They still couldn't believe what they had heard. The girl had wanted to tell everyone before the wedding that her speech had come back to her. But now she didn't know what to do. She loved Max, undoubtedly. But such intertwined destinies were very difficult for the mind to comprehend. Maria fell into a depression. Maria, what are you doing? Max asked her when she returned from Detroit. You do not want to marry me? Max, I love you very much. It's not about you. I'm just really worried, she texted her lover. Everything's gonna be okay. Her boyfriend hugged her and kissed her. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I'm sure the police will call us soon and tell us that they found this criminal. I feel it too, Maria wrote and looked intently into Max's eyes. Her gaze was full of love and tenderness. Max's parents hoped to the last moment that their son would come to his senses and give up this wedding. Mark, I don't want him to marry Maria, the wife protested. Well, if she had at least spoken. But it's such a shame, yes, only replied her husband. What can we do? I'm not ready to lose Max for this. Let him have no bread. Maybe this will sober him up. If Mark Austin at least reasoned about his reputation, Nicole could not even say how she had such a strong dislike for Maria. The woman absolutely did not want her. The day of the wedding came, and Max's parents were going to it like hard labor. Mark Austin had to invite some very important people. Everything was going well. After the registration, everyone went to the restaurant. One by one, the guests began to express their congratulations and wishes. Finally, Nicole couldn't stand it and took the microphone in her hands. Dear friends, we are very grateful to all of you. With annoyance in her voice, she said, but unfortunately, the bride cannot thank you personally. Maria is not speaking. Please excuse us. On the hall passed dissatisfied that the flow here and there. Mockery, reproaches, and caustic voices began to be heard. Maria could not stand it and got up from her table. The girl, to everyone's surprise, took the microphone in her hands. Dear friends, the bride began. It's true that I have not been able to speak for many years. And only one tragic and ridiculous accident gave me back my voice. And if Nicole had not brought up the subject, no one would have known that she had an indirect relation to my mother. Everyone, including Max, opened their mouths in surprise. The groom's mother was about to lash out at her future daughter-in-law, but Maria beat her to it. When I was in the 4th grade, I was locked in the back of the biology classroom with a skeleton 2 classmates. I lost consciousness from fear, and when I came to my senses, I couldn't speak anymore. It affected the rest of my life. I couldn't go to a normal school anymore. And the worst thing for me was that I couldn't enter the institute I had dreamed of for so many years. But I didn't give up. I did science myself, and after a while I began to realize that my knowledge is much deeper than that of most university teachers. I began to deal with the technologies of the future not for myself, but for those who will come after us. And a few months ago, I was sedated and kidnapped when I was returning home from my laboratory. When I came to, I found myself in a morgue. For the first minute, I thought I was going to go crazy. I started to choke from a panic attack, but then it was like something lit up inside me. And I decided that no matter what, I was going to live. And I heard myself screaming at the top of my lungs. My voice came back. I'd spent most of the night singing in the morgue, but no one could hear me. I somehow managed to fall asleep in the morning, leaning against the refrigerator door. It was a little warmer there, and the smell of corpses didn't make me nauseous as much. My beloved Max had found me. But the strangest thing in this whole story is who did all this and why. The bride stopped and looked around at everyone present. His name is Alex. He is my husband's cousin and Nicole's nephew. He is the one who locked me in the school with the skeleton. He's the one who brought me to the morgue to die. What did Max jump? Maria didn't tell me everything for some reason. I found out a few weeks before our wedding, the bride replied. Unfortunately, when you went to see him, he recognized me. Alex followed you to see where I lived. He also knew where my lab was located. Nicole stood a pale woman, realizing that her nephew could have done this. She knew the story from her sister. Lucy had called her one day. She was sobbing that because of some girl, she now had to send her son to his mother. Naturally, the girl was drunk, and Nicole didn't believe her at the time. I'll kill him. Jumped out of the table, Max. Why did he do that? You bastard, I wouldn't let you do that. Maria said. And besides, God had already punished him. He went crazy and died a few weeks later. The police suggest that he saw me as the cause of all his problems in life. A quiet, gifted girl who drove him crazy, but whom he didn't love, but hated with all his being. Mark Austin approached his wife Nicole, unable to contain her emotions. She cried loudly, "Well, you cannot be responsible for him or for your sister," stroked her on the head husband. That's the end of your family's story. Nicole, let go. All of it. We need to move on. The woman came to her senses and approached Maria, where her mother was crying. Maria, forgive me, please. Her mother-in-law rushed to her. I didn't want you so much, but why couldn't I understand? I see now that Alex was my only link to my family. I intuitively supported him over you. My girl, I'm sorry, Nicole, it's not your fault. Her fiancé hugged her and sobbed. Martin, I hope you didn't say anything to them. Mark Austin was worried. Maria has such an intuition that it's as if she knows everything in advance. Mark Austin, I'm sure that none of them guessed anything. His son's friend reassured him. The two cautiously jumped out of the publisher's office and headed toward a large bookstore with a huge conference room. Reporters, television, and some interested businessmen had already gathered there. We're going to make some noise in Salt Lake City. Martin was rubbing his hands together. Mark Austin, I'm going after them. An hour later, Martin's car turned towards the center. Maria and Max, tired from the lab, were on their way home. Martin, where are we going? Max asked him in bewilderment. Do you need to go to the city center? Yes, the guy smiled enigmatically. We're going to a place right now. Max, but it's very urgent. The guys got out of the car and headed towards some hall. There were a lot of people standing there. Martin, are the reporters shocked? Maria asked. She wanted to ask something else, but Mark Austin ran up to her. Maria, hurry up. He grabbed the girl's hand and ran with her into the depths. I don't know what's going on here. Max was looking around. Did they come to film us? A friend guessed. Martin didn't answer anything. He just shouted Max forward. And he found himself in the center of the hall. Dear friends, a young girl with a microphone appeared from somewhere. Today is a historic day. We can equate it with the day Nikola Tesla presented his motor. And back then, it was a miracle. It was the first time in history that alternating current could be harnessed. Today, we want to introduce you to the heroes of our time. And as you may have noticed, among them is Maria. She's not a secretary or a lab cleaner. She is the most important brain who has created about 10 significant inventions. Today, we want to introduce you to our altruists closer and tell you what the guys have done to ensure a better future for all of us. We are sure that after our story, after everything we have heard, many people will realize that this is where we should invest our energy and money. New technologies will bring prosperity to our country, especially when not only men, but also women work on them.